Okay.
Okie doke. George usually reads that first. Sorry, we're reverberating.
You? I'm on mute, so.
I do have my speaker on. That's only just one though.
I should have on speakers. If I go to other, that'd be okay.
Okay, Gail, you want to let us know when folks are situated?
Got about 196 people. Looks like it's settled into that number.
Okay.
This special board meeting is conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N2520. Please use the following toll-free number and meeting ID to call into the meeting. Open session, July 8th to 2020, special board meeting workshop. Telephone 1-669-900-9128. Meeting ID 825-7186-9140 and password 531614. The board meeting is also available on our website at TUSD.org, or the agenda, as well as the presentation materials for today.
Speakers wish, I'm going to try my headphones and see if they're working. Can you guys hear me? Yes, no?
That's good.
Yes, we can hear you.
Am I audible? Speakers wishing to address the board on agenda topics are permitted 3 minutes per topic. Total time granted for public input shall be limited to 30 minutes per topic when we get to that point. I do want to call this meeting to order at 3:07, it looks like. Thank you for your indulgence in letting us get set and ready to go. Welcome everyone. We're happy to have you join us and be part of our first board workshop with our new superintendent, Dr. Stowe. So this will be a fun and exciting afternoon, I'm sure. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. So if everyone will stand, and if you have a flag nearby, give it a holler. Okay, put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna still try to use this. If you guys can't hear me, somebody needs to signal me so that we can go back to the drawing board. I do want to call this meeting to order and remind everybody that we all are all involved in a really enormous undertaking here. It is a daunting task for us to resume school at our school facilities. I don't like to say reopen because we're not really reopening because our schooling and instruction have continued, but we are going to be reopening our facilities. So I want to thank the task force that has worked on this so diligently and for actually a considerable amount of time thus far, and will continue through the summer, including community members, cabinet, parents, staff, teachers, and all the other stakeholders. Thank you so much for doing that. Our task today is to get a firm grasp on the instructional models that we will use for reopening our schools. And I really want us to focus on this today if we can. So we need to talk it out and look over the information, see what else we need to make the decision. And I do have a plea before we even begin, that for folks that are out there in the community, for you parents and people that have connections with students that are going to be rejoining us in our facilities, please have your kids learn how to wear face coverings. Really, really important. If you can have them, use them at home, learn how to use them appropriately and feel comfortable with them, so that when they come back to us and wear them in the school environment, it will be a functional masking sort of a thing. So please take that to heart and help our kids out to learn those things. And with that said, I think I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stowe and the committee to do a short presentation on the instructional models.
Thank you, Mrs. Reagans and board members, for taking the time this afternoon to provide an additional opportunity for input from the community into, as we work to inform and engage others in the development of the physical school reopening plan. We live in a time that is critical to education, educators, and children. The global pandemic has created challenges that we have never experienced and has also exacerbated issues for students involving access to technology and nutrition, as well as academic and social emotional support. We know that we need to continue and provide these resources to our students and look for new and unique ways in which to engage families to support their children's overall development. Today, we will do a short presentation to the board and ask specifically to focus on, as Mrs. Reagans mentioned, the instructional models that we are asking the board to take action on at our regular meeting on Monday night, July 13th. There are many logistical and health and safety questions that we continue to work on, and we will provide updates as we work through the process, getting information from available resources. In addition to the task force and committees, we presented much of this information at 2 prior public board meetings. We also had 2 parent surveys where we inquired with parents as to their sense of sending their child to school physically or not. We did a staff survey, and just in the last 24 hours, we've had 2 employee sessions where, with our classified and certificated employees, we have been able to meet with them via Zoom, over 500 people in total, to answer questions and share information about the physical reopening as well. Our guiding principle as we really think about what we want is, number 1, the health and safety of students, staff, and their families. We make sure that we follow the guidance from agencies such as the LA County Department of Public Health, California Department of Public Education, and the LA County Office of Education for this guidance. We also want to make sure, as we think about physically reopening, what are those best practices for teaching and learning, both online and in person, as well as the social, emotional, and physical development of our students. We know that that is critical, and that is why we've got so many people involved in the process, from teachers and classified employees, administrators and parents, and other community members, to be able to make sure that we are really taking a high priority on instruction and learning. We've also been waiting for new orders from the LA County Department of Public Health. Many of you have heard us reference that in the last meeting on June 29th. We were told that we would have something by the end of June. We were then told we would have something by July 4th weekend. Yesterday, the Department of Public Health told us that we should expect something by the end of the week as far as new orders that school districts, all school districts, or all schools, public and private, must follow. Some of their guidance will include things like physical distancing, face coverings, and other safety protocols that we will have to implement in order to resume physical school in person. We've received many questions over the past few weeks, and we have tried to incorporate many of the answers into our presentation. Although we know that there are many questions that still can't be answered, we will continue to provide them as quickly as we can to the board as well as the community. So with that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Mara, who leads our organization or our operations task force committee. And he will go through some of that and we'll have each cabinet member speak, concluding with Dr. Crumpy, who will go into more depth on the instructional models. Gil?
Dr. Stowe, can I interrupt for just a moment? I've neglected to do adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion and a second for that, please?
So moved.
We adopt it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stowe. Real quick on this slide, these is the breakdown of the task force. Over here on the right, I am Gil Mara, and I've been chairing the operations task force. So one of the subcommittees under operations is facilities. There are a lot of guidelines out there on how to prepare our facilities to welcome back our faculty, staff, and students safely back on our campus. We know that we'll want to prepare for physical distancing in all of our spaces, which include classrooms, offices, and areas where our students will eat their meals. So we're prepping these places as we speak. Since the last day of school in June, our custodial staff and our M&O and facilities crew have been going classroom by classroom, measuring out the spaces in our classrooms to ensure that we provide the physical distancing between our teachers and our students. We're also in the middle of producing the signage to, again, encourage the hand washing, the not touching your face, physical distancing, and markers on the ground to promote physical distancing. So the signage will be produced in-house, and that will be going up in the next few weeks. In areas and spaces where our teachers and students have to work closer than 6 feet, we're producing plexiglass barriers. Again, this is also being in-house, saving us a lot of money. We've purchased a lot of plexiglass, and as you can see on this picture, we have one of our folks in M&O actually forming the plexiglass, and our schools will be able to order this as a stock item as needed in the school sites. We're having to look at areas for isolation. Should a person like a student or a faculty member fall ill, and trying to determine what type of illness it is and what the symptoms are, whether or not it's a basic Band-Aid or a scrape of the knee, or if it's a little more serious and we're having to perhaps deal with symptoms that are related to COVID-19, we're identifying isolation areas on campus. A big question we're getting a lot of is regarding ventilation in our schools. 18% of our classrooms have AC, so we're working with our HVAC experts here in the district, making sure that our ventilation is appropriate and proper in our schools, that we can open windows well enough and doors, of course, open, and allowing for good air circulation as recommended by the CDC guidelines, in addition to OSHA guidelines that have been put out there. And then identifying pathways in our campuses so that you're not having bottlenecks of students and people in particular areas. Again, providing that social distancing that we need as students move about the campus. So we're pretty hard at work in getting our facilities ready to go. We really, when you look at it, we have about 30 working days left before August 21st. So we have quite a lot of work to do in order to prepare our facilities, but we've been at it for quite a few weeks already. On that note, cleaning and disinfecting is a big part of operations. The pandemic has really forced us to look at how we are going to intensify our cleaning and disinfecting on campus. So we're developing protocols, again, following the guidelines that have been established. Some counties have already produced some guidelines, and I imagine that our LA County public health guidelines will be pretty similar when it comes to cleaning protocols. Most of it is, cleaning frequently, getting all the touch points, cleaning off desks, right? And then limiting the sharing of material between students. We have EPA approved disinfectants and cleaning supplies that have already been ordered. A lot of it is already in in our warehouse, and we've got training that is going to be scheduled for the folks to be able to use these disinfectants. It's really important that the training occurs, especially for the use of disinfectants, because disinfectants are a biocide, right? So we've got to be careful with the use of those. And because we have to intensify the cleaning and the disinfecting, we're looking at modifying our custodial schedules to accommodate the work that's going to be needed on our campuses daily as students come and go. So that is operations in a nutshell. I'll turn it over to Dr. Liberati.
Thank you, Mr. Maher. I appreciate it. And as Dr. Stowe mentioned, probably talked to over 500 people in the last day or so. So I'll keep it brief as well. We're going to continue to use the guidelines we have to continue to do the work that Mr. Maher mentioned. I don't know how different the new orders are going to be, but we know that they're going to be consistent with a few things that Dr. Stowe mentioned at the beginning. For instance, requiring the face coverings, the social distancing and the safety distancing, the staying home if you're ill, etc., and working through that process until we get the new orders, hopefully by the end of this week. That kind of covers bullet 2 and the collaboration that we'll have, and quite a bit of human resources, health and safety with operations, but there'll be overlap with all 5 committees for sure to meet the objective of folks, students, faculty, and staff returning to work in the physical plant safely, and as safely as they could possibly be. I'm not going to get into detail regarding the survey, but we did complete a survey, as Dr. Stowe mentioned, middle of June. A couple questions asked yesterday's Zoom meeting, whether or not a second employee survey would be generated. I'll take that back to the committee. We'll discuss it. However, in previous conversations, we did discuss the potential for a second survey depending on changes in needs as they come forward. Go on to the next slide. Last couple of Zoom meetings, I got into a little more detail. I'll just go over the 6 subcommittees, and they cover just about anything you could think about as it relates to health and safety, in addition to personnel, which covers a lot of the personnel, human resources pieces, but they include safety within facilities, risk management, contingency planning. I kind of make an effort to pull that one out a little bit more, because that'll be the committee that discusses in more depth the contact tracing that we'll have to do. And having done that a few times over the summertime, that's a daunting task as well, to do it well and to make sure that people stay safe at the same time. The school day, training and information sharing, and personnel, which includes looking at collective bargaining agreements, other potential leaves, etc. And the next slide looks at next steps, and just as an example of next steps, and there's a lot of next steps, and there will be a lot of next steps when we receive the new orders from the health department. But training is important, making sure that the protocols, all the safety measures are effectively communicated to all concerned. In addition to parents, as Ms. Reagan's mentioned at the beginning, work that parents do at home with students regarding facial coverings is going to be critical. We'll do the same thing at work and with students as well to emphasize the importance of personal protection equipment. Working with all employees again, bullet 2, and then we may have to address some individual more unique needs that an employee may have depending on their personal situation or medical situation, and probably that will involve me more individually working with those folks through a process to support them and discuss potentially accommodations, reasonable accommodations that would allow them to perform the essential functions of the job. And that completes my presentation. On to Dr. Kim.
Thank you, Dr. Liberati. I'll giving a brief report from the Family and Community Engagement. First of all, the committee is made up of 3 different subcommittees. The primary purpose for communication systems is to ensure effective communication and provide information to all of our district stakeholders, as well as be a central hub for all communication that's disseminated between and through each of the 5 task force committees, and provide new information about the reopening of schools in the fall. The second subcommittee, Community Partnerships, it's reviewed many different methods, many different resources and methods for how to get these resources out to our Torrance families. And so we will also assist other task force committees in promoting and organizing organizations, presentations, and trainings that are created for employees or parents. The third, key systems and supports. The largest task for this subcommittee is to investigate how to provide on-site childcare and supervision for families. And so we're partnering with various organizations such as the City of Torrance and the YMCA in order to do that. Next slide, please. Some of the recent actions and recommendations by the committee have been to disseminate information to parents just last week, I believe on Thursday, about the 5 most helpful resources that are currently available to them, including summer day camps that are not operating by the City of Torrance at 6 different parks. And the YMCA will be operating out of our Griffith Adult Ed Center for summer day camp beginning on Monday. The Community Partners Subcommittee has gathered many of the resources, and they will be promoting a presentation for families, and this will occur next Wednesday, July 15th, and hosted by our Coordinator of Parent and Community Engagement, Nancy Gutierrez. So parents can ask questions about resources live during the seminar, and it will also be recorded for anyone who is not able to attend. Lastly, on-site childcare and supervision will occur on school campuses if it is allowed. So that means if health and safety guidance allows it, if there's facilities and personnel available, if it doesn't cause budget deficits, and if outside groups are allowed to operate by some of those groups that were already mentioned, like the Department of Public Health and LACO directives. So at this time, unfortunately, there's still many unknowns about this subject. We do know that the YMCA and the City of Torrance want to help us as much as possible, but they have to adhere to their own licensing rules, health and safety regulations, personnel, and budgetary constraints. So talks and continuation will continue on this subject. Next, Dr. Egan.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Good afternoon, everyone. I am chairing the Social and Emotional Support Systems Task Force team. In bold on the next couple of slides indicate 5 different subcommittees that we're working in order to build some effective solutions and supports for this coming school year. So the first is the Behavior Support Subcommittee. And one of the key things in development is a matrix, which offers a guide on student behavior expectations, regardless of the learning platform in which they're attending. For example, you'll hear about a couple of those options when Dr. Cruppy speaks, so I'll leave it at that. In addition, the matrix really is going to offer the positive types of behaviors in order to be successful, as opposed to a discipline matrix, which kind of indicates what happens when you do something wrong. I mean, it'll offer all possibilities, but focus on how to be successful. The next subcommittee is the Family Engagement Subcommittee, and we'll be working very closely on a continuous basis with Dr. Kim and his team. However, this committee is emphasizing ways to establish different kinds of community supports that exist for parents and families, and then make those connections when a family or parent or student is in need. In addition, we're seeking ways in which we might identify other forms of parent support groups and family support groups in our community. Next slide, please. School-based mental health systems has a twofold priority. First is learning about mental health and awareness, and that's things some of you as parents may be familiar with, the second step curriculum, some lessons that occurred in elementary and middle school classrooms last year. In addition, we want to also promote ways in which we can ensure that counseling services are available and accessible for all kids, regardless of their learning platform. I noticed that there were some questions of parents asking specifically about that, and I hope we can provide answers for you today if you have further questions. But know that that's a priority for us. We want to make sure that the services are available for our students throughout. The remaining 2 subcommittees focus more on those things associated with staff and linking similar kinds of supports for them, keeping traditions intact as well that might keep the school year feeling as normal as possible when it comes to milestones and things that occur. Next slide, please. And just a real quick update, we are looking with small group of lead folks in our district at ways in which we can support athletics and the other performing arts and extracurricular programs. Just know that a lot of that is pending some of the orders that are coming forth. And until then, we're just kind of in a holding pattern, but preparing for ways to do these with safe conditions in place should we be released to do so at such time. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Crumpy to talk about instruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Egan. So reporting on the instruction committee, and then as we get through the models of instruction that we are recommending, we really have been working on how to best prepare to educate our students when we resume school. Always looking at what's in the best interest for our students, but what is in a doable fashion for our teachers. We've really been focusing on being ready for all stages of opening. You may be familiar with stage 1, our safer at home order, stage 2, which is allowing our schools to resume, and then all the way to stage 4, where we can not have any of our limitations. So the committee is really working and planning on whatever the model is, how can we be able to shift back and forth as needed, ensuring that we are adhering to the county and state health department orders. Go. So we have actually 4 subcommittees, but one of them Dr. Egan talked about with our extracurricular activities. So the 3 that I'm going to talk about today is our curriculum and instruction. There are over 150 people that participate in and out on this committee and subcommittees. In addition to the overall committee, they then break up and have high school, middle school, and elementary school subcommittees that also meet so we can engage more stakeholders, get and seek more, ideas, and that then the smaller committee brings back weekly to discuss. We have special populations. How are we ensuring that our special education, our English learners, our low-income foster homeless students are being instructed, and how are we being prepared and ready for them in August? And then extended learning opportunities. What do we do? And a lot of this has to do with the lost learning. I'm going to speak about that in just a little bit. So curriculum instruction, they've really been working, starting, I think their first meeting was the Friday before Memorial Day. And we took a few weeks to talk about, school was still in session. And so we really talked about what worked. A lot of good things happened. And so we really had conversations with our teachers instructionally about the different successes that we had. We know that we want to learn from that and get better and be ready to go, in the fall, both synchronously when we're live in front of kids, and asynchronously when students are tending to their learning, without the teacher. We've really been focusing on then the models. How does this work? We know that keeping a 6-foot social distancing guideline does not permit us to have an entire class and all of our students in school. Using the 6 feet model, this generally means that we can get about half of our kids in school. To go full time, we would need twice as many classrooms and twice as many teachers. So knowing that that's not within the budget and we don't have enough classroom space, we've been working on what model can we come up with. Distance learning guidelines for students, parents, and teachers. What are our standards that we want to ensure, how to help with consistency and limit that variability? The flexibility I've spoken about. There may be really good ideas out there, but we don't think they work well in all stages. So we're really considering that. And then finally, we have been keeping a running list and keep revisiting based on what we do and based what recommendations we receive from the board, what professional development do our teachers need so that we can ensure success in the fall. And also our families and our new students coming in, be it the launch preschool kiddos that are 3, all the way up to our transition, post high school, 12th grade, kids. What training do they all need to be ready for school? The Service to Special Populations Committee and this is newer information, have some recommendations and information. And one of those is if parents choose the blending learning model for their kids, the recommendation is for our self-contained special ed classrooms to return to school full-time. And our recommendation is that's with the 4-day-a-week model. There are very few of these classrooms that already can't adhere to the current social distancing guidelines. And we believe that to provide, the federal guidelines have not been, altered in any way. We have to provide full IEP minutes and work on those goals with those students as we should. And so we believe that for our most at-need kids in our self-contained classrooms, that to have them on campus all day is better for them. Our Learning Center RSP students would then choose distance learning or whatever model. And then the effort will be made in that point to then pull them out as little as possible during core learning time. And we don't want students coming to school for half a day or every other day and then being pulled out in services. So coming up with creative ways, some of our DIS services are services for students like counseling or speech services. We've actually had good success doing those via virtual learning, distance learning, and utilizing that asynchronous time will be a priority for our schools. And finally, and we have another new committee that's starting tomorrow to really look at how do we extend learning time for our other groups of students that may need more of our instruction. Go. IEPs will be continued to held in a distance learning format. We did that throughout the spring. If there would be, due to technology, needs, a parent might need to be on campus, we will make arrangements for that, knowing that everybody else may be not in the room and attending via Zoom. So IEPs at this time are going to continue in a distance learning or in a distance virtual format. Our own SELPA will be helping us in supporting the backlog of assessments. As you can imagine, any initial or triannual, we are required to reassess every 3 years any of our special needs students, and all of that has been stopped and put on hold, and so there's quite a backlog. So we're thankful that SELPA is stepping in and going to help us with that, because many of the times these assessments have to be conducted in person. And so we're working, and I think Gil and Dr. Liberati, or Mr. Marr and Dr. Liberati are both helping with the type of safety for our people to return and help assess kids safely. The final committee, extended learning opportunities, is ensuring that we really are taking care of any of the lost learning. You may remember that when the governor's budget initially was presented, some of the lost learning mitigation funds, Torrance was receiving $0. They were, the initial proposal was to only give the monies to concentration districts that have a very, very high level of low income students. Fortunately, we had some advocacy of our local elected representatives, and we were able to, when the budget was finally signed, Torrance Unified will be receiving learning loss mitigation funds for our students. With that, though, comes some requirements, and one of them is that we will need to have a diagnostic assessment for math and English language arts. We will also be required to progress monitor, which we would do anyway. So we think with our PLCs and the way we have common formative assessments in our schools that we're in very good shape there, how we intervene and assess learning on an ongoing basis. we're kind of excited because what we don't really have is this diagnostic assessment, like a screener tool, if you will, for math and English language arts. We have used a running record very, very successfully. It is the top-notch blue ribbon way to assess and know and understand how our students are comprehending reading and where they are in their reading instruction. We recognize, though, that time is of an essence and very difficult to give this one-on-one instruction diagnostic assessment, a running record, via distance learning. This looked like it was going to be a huge amount of money of this lost learning mitigation that we might have to use, but Dr. Nygren, our coordinator for our intervention and instruction program, was able to find a nonprofit that is actually giving us this for next to nothing, almost free for next year. And so he's looking into that, but we're very excited because that will just give us a focus on using the loss mitigation funds on the instructional needs of our students. Next. And a repeat slide, but I think important for people, you know, watching that may not have seen this before. We do have some rules and requirements that came with the budget trailer bill. We do not have flexibility in the number of days that students go to school. It's 180 days, and it will continue to be 180 days in whatever fashion it looks like and whatever model it looks like. We were given flexibility, though, in instructional minutes. For the most part, it's the equivalent of 4 hours a day instead of 6 hours a day. So we received that flexibility. It's a little less in first through third grade. It's 10 minutes less per day and then kindergarten is actually 180 minutes or 3 hours a day. We received requirements for distance learning. And I think I spoke about this at the board meeting last night. There are a number of requirements. I think most notably is the requirement for daily live instruction by the classroom teacher. And also that that schools have a plan in place to ensure the connectivity of the student. And it kind of goes into the guidelines that we're putting in place on our committee for distance learning. That if they are not logging on and not doing the work and not progressing, that we may want to rethink what option that they have chosen. So we've got requirements that schools will have to have a structure in place to reach out and make sure our kids are participating. And there is a state emphasis to encourage students to return to school. We still await guidance for this, but the focus that our legislative groups have put in place for this is that we're supposed to offer in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible. And the distance learning should be offered to students who are medically at risk or are exposed to COVID-19. And so while this is still receiving a lot of interest and a need for guidance, we're hoping to even get further guidance on this. We do not have to ask for a doctor's note when we offer our distance learning. So we think that the models that we are proposing, that we're solid with all of our trailer bill information. Next, Gil. So the instruction committee has really looked at two models: a distance learning model where students would learn from home full-time, and a blending learning model where students would learn at school and at home. Dr. Stowe mentioned we gave 2 surveys to our parents, one in June and one in July, or I'm sorry, one in the end of May and one in June, that asked what their feelings were about which model they would choose if they would choose today. The first survey results are that 76% of our families wanted to return to school. And the second time we gave the survey, it's 80%. So 80% of our families are requesting a model that allows their children to return to school. Okay. So what are these two models? The first one, learn from home 5 days a week, taught by credentialed teachers with that daily synchronous instruction that I spoke about, 4 days a week. This means that an elementary student would have one classroom distance learning teacher. but that our middle and high school students would have 6 teachers, 1 for each of the subjects that they're enrolled in. We are not buying a prepackaged curriculum. We think this is an advantage for our students to have the contact with the teachers, knowing that in eventuality, we want to return everybody to school. And so having the opportunity to have those teachers with our materials and our experts is much better than an online program that is taught, via videos and worksheet work. And so our elementary, we will actually have a virtual learning platform. They are madly working, and 6-12 are starting to, I think as we get the models and some of these things solidified, then they're going to move forward with the work involved. Had a conversation with a secondary math teacher just today on what other materials that might help them as they move forward as well. Blended learning. Students will learn at home for part of the week and learn at school for part of the week, broken into 2 cohorts. They're going to be assigned a teacher as in the past, and use Google Classroom or TUSD when learning from home. So these are the pros and cons that the committees have put together. We discussed this last Monday, but I think this is the crux of a lot of the conversation today. Our secondary have come up with what are the pros and cons of the 2 different models, whether it would be AM, PM, meaning students would come to school either in the morning 4 days a week or in the afternoon 4 days a week, versus an alternate day model. They would come all day, one day, and then learn from home the next day. We call that like an A-B alternate day model. The second, and you will see as you go through these slides that many of these pros show up for cons on the next model analysis. So it starts looking quite familiar. There are some advantages to the AM/PM model. Every student coming to school every day provides that accountability, that contact with staff, and there's value and definite benefits to that. The secondary teachers did not feel, though, that this was very conducive to that 6-period day and how that would impact students. 100% of the students on campus all day for a high school of 2,000 students. That's a lot of kids coming in and out and needing to clean for. They do anticipate some lower attendance with this model, that when it's only half day, that a lot of students would think it would be easier to miss just 3 of their classes. And we have a lot of special programs, our athletics, our 8th grade, where having a period 4, 5, and 6 would then meet in the morning on a Tuesday, let's say. 6th period would be at maybe 11 o'clock. How would some of our walk-on coaches instruct or supervise, period 6 classes that might happen in the middle of the day? Many of our walk-on coaches are, have other jobs until the afternoon. And we also have a very strong, robust 8th grade accelerated program, which would be very difficult in an AM/PM model to transport them back and forth to classes for their high school classes. The alternate day model, right, where half of the kids come on a Monday, the other half come on a Tuesday. This has more of a routine and a feel for a normal school day. Only half of the number of kids are on campus. They think that's better for the ability to clean, better attendance. They do feel that the older the student is, the more they're able to handle the asynchronous time. And then the part-time teachers and athletics that I already talked about as a con on the other model. Next. The elementary teachers, though, strongly feel that the AM/PM model has a lot more benefit for them. The daily attendance and the social, for both instruction and socioeconomic or social emotional needs, excuse me, is really beneficial. Building that rapport and relationship, that consistency of instruction, not having full multiple days away from school. There is a feeling that even with 3 days off, it's how much they have to reteach after a long weekend, that would be every week, and it would really set them back. Also in an AM/PM model with the number of minutes, if they're in school for 2.5 hours, that's 90 minutes of asynchronous work to complete, which they think is a much more doable for elementary kids, as opposed to in the next model. Gil, let's just go to the final pro-con. That in this model they would have 4 hours of asynchronous time without their teachers available to them, because their teacher would be teaching the other cohort. They do believe, though, that a longer day would allow for depth and a variety of instruction. So they do see a benefit to having half of their kids all day long. Obviously, that's less exposure and a more effective cleaning, and more manageable to have half of the kids for entering and leaving class. They just felt that the more they had conversation was that that having kids home for full days and that loss of continuity of instruction made them not prefer this model. Yeah. So what would the sample schedule look like in an A/B model for secondary schools? And it works very similarly for, I didn't keep adding slides, whether it would be an AM/PM model. But the idea is, if it was an A/B model for secondary, which this is a sample, is that on a Monday, cohort A works on campus all day long. Cohort B is working asynchronously at home. Tuesday is then the flip of that. Wednesday is the committee's preferred recommended day for, we're calling it that fifth day. Everybody would be asynchronously on that day. And it allows for, that day allows for both cohorts to work together. You could, in an elementary model, you can put both cohorts, AM and PM, or alternate day together, and have some connectivity, some social emotional work, a way to check in with your kids. They're going to go off and have more asynchronous time, especially if the way the secondary model is being proposed, where it allows them to have kind of a midweek check-in to then either that whole day, if they were to do that Wednesday morning, to that day is asynchronous for kids, so they can kind of foreshadow the work and also foreshadow the work for the rest of the week, answer any questions that they might have had doing their asynchronous work on Monday and Tuesday, allowing that professional development time, PLC time, and possibly not ready for any of this yet, but an opportunity for a third day of instruction for some of our high need students that might have the opportunity to come on campus in very small groups of students to do some targeted work. Yeah. So as I discussed last time, both committees prefer a different model. Secondary prefers the AB model, elementary prefers the AM/PM model. Both have been working, though, on those cons of the model that they do not prefer, and they are working to mitigate those cons. So they understand that the decision is with the board, and are ready to move forward with whatever the board decides. Bill? So finally, just wanted to kind of put some dates out there to see like where we were as a timeline. So Monday night, we're hoping for board approval for our reopening guidelines. Then that gives us the following day to finalize communication, get that communication translated, so that Wednesday the 15th, we can communicate with staff and families what those guidelines are. At that same time, ask our parents to review those guidelines and opt into distance learning. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. and if they choose to opt into distance learning, with multiple communications then going out, because it is a short timeline, both from the district level and then have sites following that up, making sure parents are getting multiple emails and will open these emails, and connecting with our families, so that following Monday by the end of day, that we've got the distance learning choice deadline, so that the next 2.5 weeks, sites can then do their class lists and their master schedules. It's a really short timeline, but that gives us a target date of August 10th, which is just 2.5 weeks before school starts, to have families receive their cohort notification of whatever, whatever cohort that they may be in. I want to go back to the distance learning choice deadline. Our recommendation is that whatever the board gives us direction on the blended learning model, that's our model, that we are communicating with staff and families, but then asking families to actually opt into the distance learning. It'll have them click into the distance learning model. We are worried that we're going to spend this July 21st to August 7th time trying to track down and run down families, and then have it really disrupting the timeline and the schedule to get families notified so they know when their kids are going to be going to school. And so the recommendation is that we assume everyone is going to do the blended learning model unless they opt into the distance learning model. They can continue, if they miss the deadline, to let us know that that's their preference. It would be space available, wait list kind of a function, so schools can start their planning. And so that's kind of just a timeline for you to see how quick everything is happening. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Crumpy. And board members, I know you've got a lot of communication and a lot of things that you've been reading and thinking about. And I thank you so much for guiding this district and the community and being so receptive to all of the stakeholders in this process. We also heard yesterday, just want to let you know, and that probably I heard it on the news this morning coming in, that the Department of Public Health officer did also say that schools should be ready to do 100% of learning online at some point, should there be an outbreak in a school or the numbers in the community be so much that that the county Department of Public Health shuts schools down. And so, but even with that, we need to have a decision of which cohort are students in. Are they in the distance learning model or are they in the blended model? Because that's going to be the key thing that allows our school site administrators to build schedules and then notify families appropriately of what those what their options are going to be. So with that, Mr. Reagans, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Harry, unmute, please. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I thought I was unmuted before. Sorry. I must have muted when I was listening to Tim. Thank you, Dr. Gerson. It's obvious that there are many working pieces, and this is a very complex situation that we're in. But I do want to reiterate that our job here today, and in fact, the agenda item says that the learning models will be presented that incorporate what we know at this time about health and safety requirements, including physical distancing. So we do have the staff recommendations for what they want, what has been presented to them by the task force as how the task force has preferred to go forward in terms of instructional models. And it's actually the opportunity for the board to ask questions and discuss. Now, that having been said, we are also here to get input from the community and comments. We will be opening up to do that very soon, but I want folks to know that we are happy to hear your comments and questions, and we will take those into advisement as we have the discussion. But answering questions here and now is not probably going to be possible because that's very time consuming. And we've spent 5-6 hours doing that in the last few days, so we know how much time that can consume. I do believe, though, Dr. Stowe, that we will be having parent opportunity for workshops on a regular basis in the next few weeks. Is that right?
Yes, I'll let Dr. Crumpy answer that.
Okay, Dr. Crumpy.
Oh, sure. Starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. We have plans throughout July and as long as needed to actually have weekly check-ins. We have some gracious parents that have agreed to also be panelists, and they are representing the different committees on the task force. And so I think both they can even help answer questions from a parent perspective. They're going to help me facilitate the chat room as well, but also they can then bring back any parent questions back to their subsequent committee. So we're hoping that that's a nice two-way communication model while this plan gets solidified.
Okay, thank you. And I bring that up so that you know that even if we don't answer your questions here and now, there will be opportunities for that. And if you have written to any of us, which many of you have, we will be getting back to you with the responses that we do have at our disposal. I saw Dr. Farrar, by the way, from the LA County Department of Public Health on a press conference just before I came here. And she reiterated about 10 times that her job is to help us open as much as we can with as much safety as possible. So keep that all in mind, that we still are bound by those considerations as we're moving forward. I have a couple of letters that I received from folks who cannot attend today, and I did want to read some of the content into this consideration today, just so folks would have them. Don is?
Yes.
Don? Yes, Mr. Lee?
Yeah, there seems to be some confusion, certainly in social media, which is the definition of confusion, about whether we're required to do what the county health department does, or their suggestion. We can do whatever we want to do. There's a little back and forth. So I thought maybe I'd get that out there for the people who know to answer that question.
Well, actually, I can answer that question because I was on a call with Dr. Gilchick the other day, who is the gentleman who is in charge of child and adolescent faction of the County Department of Public Health. And we asked him that very specific question. This was a group of school board members from California School Boards Association. On that call, we said, so we're waiting for your protocols. Can we go ahead and arrange things the way we want them to be? He said, well, you've gotten direction from a number of different sources, but I can tell you here and now that the rules and regulations that we put into the County Department of Public Health protocols are the rules that you must abide by. They will be essentially law once they are produced and ordered. So that's what I know about that. Did you have anything to add, Dr. Stowe?
Well, can I throw in?
Sure.
I've heard, and Mrs. Liu was on many of the same meetings as I was. We've heard from the governor's staff in one meeting. In a different meeting, we heard it directly from California's Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond. I can't tell you how many times, and those are the two at the state level who've told us county public health is in charge. And so even state instruction, what I've heard in meetings is follow county public health. So that's the input I wanted to give.
Well, and in fact, even though we have the state direction, the expectation is that the county, because LA County is impacted differently than many counties, that our protocols will be more restrictive than most other counties. So, unfortunately, but for better or worse.
Yeah, there was just a member of the community said they had a conversation with the head of county health, and their response was, we'll give recommendations, but each district can do what they want to do, which seems to be counter to what everything else I'm hearing. So good to hear that that they make the rules. So good. Thank you very much.
Well, it's good to hear, except that as someone else has alluded to, it's been over a month now that they've been promising to get the rules to us. So we don't know the rules yet that we have to play by. So that makes it quite difficult.
And then the last meeting I was with Dr. Gilchick, he said, well, even when we give you the guidelines, they could change the next day.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
It's very frustrating.
Yes, indeed. But thank you for asking that, Mr. Lee. And thank you for letting me know his hand was up because I couldn't see him. That's one problem with Zoom. You can't see everybody if you don't have a big enough screen. I do want to read a couple of letters here quickly to start the process here. I do have a letter from Lisa Miller, who wrote to me about sanitation plans for returning to school. This is actually a common theme in the letters I'm receiving. My name is Lisa Miller. I'm a community member, parent, and teacher in TUSD, and I was on the grade 2-3 instructional committee. I am concerned about the consideration of health and safety of students and staff when returning to campus, especially for the AM/PM schedule. It meets the needs of these students for frequent and consistent in-person instruction because they are learning foundational skills required to be successful. However, there are major logistical implementation details for sanitation requirements when considering an AM/PM schedule that must be addressed. The two cohorts on campus daily requires 2 rounds of sanitation at the school site, including touch points, desk chairs, and restrooms. And she has some questions. Again, we won't be answering all of those questions now. And in fact, some of them were answered in the presentation. How will adequate sanitation be accomplished between cohorts? Who will be tasked with fulfilling this? What materials will be used? Will the surfaces be sprayed and then wiped down? And are all sites able to move the entire student body on and off campus in the short break? These requirements require thorough consideration prior to implementation. Absolutely, I agree with that. So thank you, Lisa, for those questions and considerations. I have another letter from Francis Kobayashi. Hi, Francis. I know you're at work, so I will share this at least.
Ms. Reagans, did you want to get a timer for the comment
yeah,
section?
can we time each of these? I'm trying to do them in a fairly short time frame. But yeah, again, it's a 3-minute, supposed to be a 3-minute time frame for each individual. So we will try to adhere to that. The second letter, yes.
There's so few of them. Should I make a motion that these be read in their entirety?
I actually read the last one in the entirety, and this one, she told me which, actually, the ones that were too long, I wrote back to them and asked them which parts they wanted me to focus on, and that would fit into 3 minutes. So I think we're okay, actually.
All right, just want to make sure.
I was trying to be conscientious here, but thank you. If I run over a little, we might be able to let us fudge a bit. This letter is from Francis Kobayashi. We are definitely experiencing unprecedented times, and lives of many families have been affected. I thank you for your commitment and dedication. The models are presented in the agenda, and there are some questions. Will students be assigned to a TUSD teacher from the district instead of their homeschool teachers if students choose to participate in the distance learning platform? Will they have a teacher from their homeschool if they cannot return due to health issues, but can be taught virtually? That was number 1. How will students be assured that the level of standards he is getting from distance learning and hybrid learning, or blended learning as we're calling it, are the same? Will the student be at a disadvantage in preparing for the SAT or ACT if he or she chooses distance learning? Can they participate in school sports if they choose distance learning? That was number 2. Number 3, can all virtual classes be recorded so that students can refer back if they miss anything from the Zoom class time? Hopefully the teacher will also be available and responsive to questions outside of class time. Number 4, if the secondary alternate days AB model is integrated, how will a school approach the difficult cleaning between classrooms between classes? when there are not enough disinfectant sprayers available? And how will cleaning be tackled before the next set of students comes in? And how will they disinfect bathrooms? And how will students socially distance themselves during lunch? And what are the public health guidelines? All of these things are very relevant. And last but not least, can honors and AP classes be taught virtually and students go to school only for labs? So she's really I know she has a secondary high school students, so it's not surprising that's where her focus and interest lies. And we'll try to make sure many of those we have the answers to, some we do not, so we'll answer what we can. And then the last one that I have here is from, I have to remember his name, it's Michael Choi. Is that correct? Yes, Michael Choi. He writes, Dr. Stowe and esteemed members, some of you may have received this. In regards to the reopening of schools and the presentation given to the board on the 29th of June, I, as a parent of 2 who attend Anza Elementary, believe that the process of reopening the schools has been less than transparent to parents, staff, and community. I know that there are federal, state, and county and local guidelines to be followed, and the choices set forth in recommendations were formulated from a task force. And I am concerned about the recommendations. There was an initial survey sent out on 5/27 to parents in regards to the type of learning that parents are possibly open to. But I think the process lacked transparency. A second follow-up survey was sent to parents on June 23rd, seeking feedback in regards to blended learning or distance learning as the only options. Those surveys did nothing to inform the parents of the possibility of the recommendations that came from the task force. We didn't know the recommendations actually at that point, so I can answer that. But he had questions about logistics and operations. There were no logistical operational protocols shared with parents. We don't, in fact, still have those firmly defined. Without a proper operational plan, how can parents make the best decision for their child? That is his question. What is the plan for entry of school? Temperature checks, hand sanitizing stations? How will students be using the restrooms? Is it a buddy system still? How will students spend recess or snack times? Who will be supervising the students during these times to ensure social distancing? How will you triage sick children at school and separate outdoor triage? Will there be one-way hallways? So all of that was his logistics and operations. You can't expect to open up and play by ear. We absolutely understand that. How will the cohorts be designated if you do choose the AM, PM, or the AB? What would be the hours of instruction at school? How is it beneficial to the student, and is there equity in the learning process if you're in the AM or PM? And what about the online learning piece? How would that be delivered? And last but not least, safety and health concerns. What will be the process if there is a positive test at a school site? Next is, what is the return to school policy if you show signs and symptoms and are quarantined? Next is students coming to school without masks. Will they be denied entrance or provided masks? Students coming to school and not passing temperature checks, will they be denied entrance? Will this district be providing PPE for teachers and staff? Once again, some of the answers we have, some of the answers we don't have at this point, but those are all very relevant and important considerations. And with that, I will defer to Dr. Stowe to read a letter he has.
I received one email. This is from Robin Hansen. She writes that she's the mother of 3 children in TUSD, middle, elementary, and high school, also a product of Torrance Schools, South High class of '98. Point number 1, what is the scientific evidence that is being used to justify other than a completely normal return to school in the fall? All available literature I've seen demonstrates that children are not very susceptible to the illness. They are not super spreaders. The fatality of COVID-19 has been shown to be much less than the normal flu for those under 20 years of age. Data has shown that the transmission by those who are asymptomatic is very small. For these reasons, how do you justify the current plans to limit children's school attendance, require face masks, and cancel all school sports? Little regard has been shown by TUSD for the long-lasting effects of these policies on the mental health and well-being of students. A more realistic approach is one that has been implemented in other countries and states like Florida. Florida's education commissioner just mandated that all schools will be 5-day in person. Florida's death per capita is 18, California is 17. Other states are doing the same. Encouraging hand washing and making sure those that are sick stay home will be more than sufficient. If it works for others, why would it not work in Torrance? Point number 2, distance learning in the spring was a complete failure. Very little learning took place. My 2nd grade student had assignments that seemed remedial at best. My 5th grade students' teachers cried on a regular basis during these Zoom classes and scolded them for ever daring to leave the house at risk of dying from COVID. My 8th grade student did not even have a virtual meeting with half of his teachers. Virtual classroom learning is no replacement for the real thing, and it is impossible to keep children engaged and actually learn anything at all. The thought of returning to any type of virtual distance learning in the fall is completely unacceptable. Point 3, why is TUSD bowing to LA County? As a 30-year resident of Torrance, I can attest to the absence of previous incidents when LA County dictated the course of Torrance schools. Perhaps parents believe, and up till now, have seen that Torrance schools are independent in making prudent and beneficial decisions for its students. The parents in Torrance are completely baffled by this new commitment by TUSD to follow the arbitrary, baseless recommendations issued by the LA County Public Health Officer, who is a bureaucrat with no medical degree or expertise. Why is TUSD not advocating for what is in the best interest of students of Torrance? LA County has only issued recommendations and guidelines for those schools within the county. Those are not the laws that TUSD must follow. Torrance families live here for a reason. The schools are excellent, and in the past, the students' needs have been made a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, well, oops, am I still muted? So while Dr. Stowe was speaking, I did find one other letter, he reminded me, from Kevin O'Brien. And actually this was written over a week ago. He sent it to me before we even were really soliciting letters. He wanted to thank the task force for the work that they're doing. And he said that from the board meeting broadcast recently, I understand there's a 4-day school week with children going in the AM or PM, but not both. I believe that would be the best option for the younger kids because it allows working families an opportunity to work partially out of the home most of the week. But this can also help with limiting exposure while eating at lunch. Offer bagged lunches for students to purchase, but only having half days limits the amount of time kids are eating without masks. I'm a big proponent that they all wear masks on campus no matter what age, and hope that you will do that to help control the spread of COVID. I understand the potential issues for secondary students going only half the days, and I can't speak to those because I don't have students that age. But I do believe that high school students are, if they are not monitored on the off days away from school, will be visiting friends and hanging around. We all did that as teens, and we did not have school, and teens when we didn't have school, and today's teens are no different. This unsupervised visiting can also likely result in additional COVID spreading. Should you decide to institute one system across all levels, I'm asking you to seriously consider the AM/PM split days to help prevent the further spread of COVID. But if you choose Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, I ask that teachers provide work packets for students while they are at home. And there is an hour in the day for them to interact with their teachers via Zoom come this spring, as it was this spring. We cannot expect elementary students to participate in full-day classroom learning via Zoom, as that is excessive time. There's no guarantee any of these measures will prevent COVID from spreading. And part of the reason I wanted to read this letter is because I absolutely believe that is true. But I know that TUSD, should TUSD be a center of an outbreak in Torrance, you will all be blamed. I apologize in advance for those that will debate your decision should an outbreak occur. But thank you. I know that your decision is in the best interest of the student's education, not what is most convenient for parents' schedules. Again, Towers Elementary Parent Rising, 1st and 3rd graders. So thank you, Kevin, for your thoughts. Okay, so any other letters from any other board members that they wanted to share? Okay, so I think we will move on to Those folks of you who are in our audience, again, we'll be more than happy to listen to your comments and questions. You'll have 3 minutes. I hope that, I do have instructions here somewhere.
Wait, Terry.
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
Can we have our comments first? Because maybe the comments that we asked may be answered so that the public comment will not be necessary.
We actually can do it at the pleasure of the board. I thought it might be more relevant to hear what the community members had to say, because that might color our discussion and inform our discussion when we heard what parents' perceptions and comments were.
Right.
So it can work both ways.
Yeah, but I think it'll be helpful. I think it would limit the amount of discussion, because I think in a lot of the questions that we're going to ask should be pretty much what they may be thinking.
I also didn't want to put a limit as to how much discussion we had as a board. I wanted to allow that to be more open-ended. What's the pleasure of the board? Do you want to see what the other board members think here, Mr. Hahn? It doesn't matter to me.
I'm the one who originally asked if people could actually speak. So the fact that I'm excited to see how this works.
Okay, so would you prefer they speak now or later? Before or after our discussion? What's that? Oh, we only have 3 hands raised at this point. So how about if we go forward with those and we'll see how that goes? Does that make sense? Okay.
Never mind. Now they're about 10. So 12.
Well,
So
if there are 10 and they're 3 minutes each, that's 30 minutes anyway. So
No, Mr. Egan, you can't raise your hand and ask any questions. I thought.
I see 13, Mr. Mara.
Yeah, that's about right. So I
14.
can start with the first one raised and allow them to speak. They'll have someone will time 3 minutes, and then I will mute them. And then I can move on to the next person, and you just tell me when to stop.
and we'll go for 30 minutes, whatever comes first. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So I am going to call on, I just have a first name here, Keith. Go ahead, Keith, you're on. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Keith.
Hello, thank you, board. Very good discussion. The point I wanted to raise was about testing and seeing whether or not we could test our kids before they go to school, because regardless of whether the AM, PM or the AB model, as soon as a kid comes to school, no matter how diligent we are in social distancing, I mean, kids are going to be spreading this. So requiring testing regularly. I just wanted to hear what part of the plan that was going to play, and whether that's something that we can mandate before kids go back into the classroom, just so that way they don't spread the disease to everyone else and expose vulnerable teachers. I yield my time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we said we weren't going to actually answer questions here, but that's actually, yeah.
It's not a Q&A. That they did
Yeah.
that. They're going to do that.
We will get back to you on that. Okay.
I want to hear as many people as we can.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
next person is Chantel Jackson. Go ahead, Chantel.
Lord, I just say thank you so much for your time and also some of this informative information. I know as a parent who's working and doing everything back and forth, it's definitely been a little bit of a roller coaster ride of trying to anticipate what August 26th is going to look like. In terms of just commentary, the one thing, I know that it's divided in between secondary and elementary school. I do have a kindergartner, ideally, who's meant to start, but I haven't really heard any specifics on how kindergarten would be impacted. So just as a suggestion or even commentary feedback of, so parents can prepare to what that might look like for kindergartners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I have Jay Schultz next. Go ahead, Jay Schultz.
Jay, are you there?
Go ahead and unmute yourself. You've got the floor.
Oh, sorry. Okay, my name's Judy, and I have 2 middle schoolers. And thank you very much for doing this. I know it's a very difficult situation for everyone. And my questions or comments are, it was not mentioned about temperature taken during the presentation, but later it was mentioned. And just want to make sure if that was also considered for every child to be, taking temperature. And I know there's talking about, it's a separate triage for kids who are, have fevers and what to do and whatnot. So that's the one question. And the other one is that there was mentioned that you will not be using the prepackaged teaching materials. But however, I just want to, a lot of teachers, at least my kids were online, they all direct them to YouTube or Khan Academy. So I don't know if that's considered prepackaged or not. And the other statement is, I believe Dr. Crumbie had mentioned there's going to be meetings for the parents on starting at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Are those information going to be sent out to parents so we can participate? And the parents who are on the committee, are they represented by every school, every school level? And but those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Can we reiterate the part about the parent meetings and how I believe that already has been sent out to parents, but it could be sent out again. That was Katie, I believe, that told us that.
Yes, Dr. Stowe's letter out to parents last week had that information and the Zoom link in it. And then Tammy, can I ask, it's also posted on the website?
Yes, it's under district news. If I can message, I will put the link in the chats.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next up, we have a Kevin B. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, how are you guys doing? First of all, thank you very much for all of your time. One of my best friends is a high school principal, and the amount of work he's had to put in the last few months is just unbelievable. So thank you for that. Mr. Hahn on the 29th meeting spoke, and he had mentioned that all families feel differently. Some are more worried than others, some less than others, which I completely agree with. The only thing I don't understand is I don't understand why there isn't a third option for families that aren't as concerned as others, why we don't have any classes that are normal for a teacher that wouldn't mind teaching a class as they have in years past, and parents that are comfortable having their kids in a normal classroom setting. I have the death rate of kids under the age of 17 all the way down to newborns in the entire state of California is 0. There are 0 deaths for all preschool kids, elementary school kids, middle school kids, and high school kids under the age of 17 in the entire state. And we're trying to relearn education as it's taught in this state. Does anyone else see an issue with that? Not one death. There's plenty more deaths with the regular flu every year, and we've never done anything for our kids or for teachers or for staff. But because it's COVID, we magically now have to upend our entire school system when this is less deadly for children than the regular flu? I would like someone to answer that question. And they talk about it passing it on to other people. The viral load for children is 25% as it is in adults. So they're not their super spreaders like they had talked about. And with the regular flu, children can spread the regular flu, and we go to the school all the time normally. So that's one of the huge concerns that I have. It would be great if there was a third option. I don't know if it's the teachers unions that are blocking that. I haven't heard any mention of teachers unions, which is ironic. I sat in the entire June 29th meeting and now this meeting. I haven't heard the teachers unions mentioned once. I'm sure they have a huge impact on what's going on, but I haven't heard them mentioned one time. That goes back to my next point, which is on the school days. So we have to have the 180 school days, that has to stay the same, but the amount of minutes learned, that can be reduced. So how's the curriculum going to be covered properly when the minutes are reduced, but the days are the same? So that makes no sense whatsoever. The minutes are what's important, not the days. So my question there is, why are the days have to be the same, but the minutes can be reduced? Is that the teachers union? I don't know, I'm asking. Is that the teachers union saying we have to get paid our 5 days even though we're only working 4 days? And the
President, the time.
Okay, time is up. I just wanted to answer your first question. Is there's not a third option because we are prohibited from doing that by the state as well as the county Department of Public Health with the few directives that they have already given us. So.
Well, hold on, Terry. I'm not sure that's true.
No, it is true.
The directive was guideline is that we cannot do it because we cannot socially distance. It's not because they're prohibiting us from being 5 days. He's asking the question.
I was answering the first one about the third option.
Yeah, the third option of every day. Yeah. So that has nothing to do with LA County Public Health. LA County Public Health is just telling us we just can't he's asking the question. Third option is, if I'm hearing the question correctly, is we have hybrid, we have distance learning, but let's say like 30 kids and one teacher said, we don't care, we want to meet. Why can't we do that? That's the question he's asking.
Right, because the county department has said we must maintain social distancing in the classrooms.
That's not true either.
Oh, yeah. The few directives we do have.
No. Hold on. I disagree with that because today, they said, if it's not possible to social distance in the class, you could put up barriers to separate the students. That was my question I'm going to ask Gil today, because it clearly stated today that some schools' rooms, you cannot social distance. So in those situations, you could put up barriers in between students. So I want to make sure that's clear. I don't want to misspeak for the LA County Public Health.
But the preference is that you maintain social distancing.
Yes, but again, that's preference, that's not law. So I want to be sure.
It is the current order. Is that a way to put it, Dr. Stowe?
It's a guideline.
Right. Well, and again, later this week, hopefully we'll tomorrow or.
Although today she said maybe next week.
Get those guidelines. But
no, it is frustrating that we don't have clarity even from our official sources. But that is something that we haven't considered because it hasn't been allowable according to the guidelines or however you want to look at it in terms of the official sources and their direction that they've been giving us.
This is why I didn't want to try and answer any Q&A because we're going to argue and we need a chance to be able to argue.
Right. Well, we do need
half an hour. I want to hear as many people as we can.
Yeah, we do have differences of opinion here, obviously, even on the board. I mean, it's very difficult and complex situations. All right, so let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, this is one of those times where, thank you to the district for putting together a board workshop because we can actually argue a little before we have to make the decision. So this is a good thing.
Yes.
Who's next?
Next person, Ari, A-R-I.
Ari.
West High, it says. Ari West High.
Ari, are you there?
Hi. Okay, yes, this is Ari. Yes, I'm calling from West High. I have 2 students. And my question, first of all, I want to thank you for this. It's great. My question, so I work for Lakeshore Learning Materials, and I'm working with tons of school districts that are getting privacy partitions, that are getting a lot of things to kind of work with what's going on within the classroom. And so my question is, are you guys working with companies or whatever in order to see what's being done, what's effective, what's out there? Because I'm working on so many projects for school districts that I was just surprised, or maybe Torrance is already doing this, that Torrance wasn't in the, in it as well. So I don't expect any type of answer to that, but just let you know, Lakeshore Learning Materials, which I work for, has already, school district's been working on this for 2 months and getting tons of stuff. So just wanted to let you know that.
And the short answer is yes, Ari, but thank you for that suggestion.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Next, we have Terry Jamuzu.
Hi, I'd like to request that you hire more custodians. Think about that since there have been so many sanitation concerns. You said that a lot of your emails came in with sanitation concerns, so I'd like the board to consider that option. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, James Falls.
Hey, good afternoon, board. I want to thank you all for your time and your energy that's spent in our putting something together for our kids. I kind of feel like I'm echoing my thoughts of Dr. Stowe's letter that he read by that individual. Breaks my heart to what's going on with our in our country, but also what our children are having to endure. I agree. Those surveys that went out that said that 80% of the parents would like to their kids back to school. I don't believe that was broken down into hybrid or back to traditional learning. I believe there should be, as that last two speakers ago commented, there should be a third option. Dr. Stowe, you also commented that you weren't going to share the findings of the survey that went by the employees. I think that's an important aspect of this, to understand what is going on and the factors that are leading to your decisions, and I feel those should be shared. I'm a union member, and I understand the sensitivity of that, and working with labor groups and trying to navigate those relationships. But I feel that would be very important to be fully transparent, so we can understand your decision-making process. I want to thank Dr. And excuse me, this is the first time I've ever seen the board, heard your guys' names. You guys have done a phenomenal job. And I'm a product of Torrance School District. I've been here for 30 plus years. So James Hahn, I don't know if you're a doctor or not, but I want to thank you for speaking up. I think sometimes it's easy just to go with the flow of things, and I appreciate your braveness to really understand everything's guidelines, rules, laws, and make sure everybody's on the same page. I don't want to see you guys argue, but I want to see everything vetted to make sure everything is understood. We talked about a reopening. This is a reopening. I don't believe I have a kindergartner. I'm very disappointed in how the distance learning went in the spring. I'm sad for her. I want to see her back in school. I'm actually a firefighter paramedic as well. I understand the seriousness of COVID, but I think we need to move forward, understanding that COVID's everywhere. So yes, take measures such as plexiglass, take measures such as masks, washing hands. We are putting our kids in an enclosed environment such as classrooms. 6 feet, wonderful. At a certain point, we have to be able to accept some risk so that our kids can get an education. Distance learning is not an option for these younger kids. My kids suffered greatly this last spring. So I don't really have any questions. I understand. I'll be going to those question and answer seminars that are coming up, those opportunities to get some particular questions regarding what we went over today. But I just want to echo the comment that all the parents I've spoken to want our kids back in school 5 days a week. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Brad Nelson.
Hi, this is actually his wife, Shoko Nelson. It's just under Brad's name, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a parent of 2 students and one preschooler at Torrance Unified. Both surveys that I've received from the district regarding our thoughts on our children returning to school or continuing remotely indicated that a blended learning model would, of course, comply with CDC and LA County public health guidelines. My question is, if masks are mandated on the onset of and during the school year, how will Torrance Unified enforce this at school? And will there be consequences or penalties to any students or families who refuse to comply? From a recent Facebook update by James Hahn, he made it sound as though there were 2 categories in which families fall: those afraid of the virus and want to continue remote learning, and those unafraid of the virus and want to send kids back to school. Please understand that there are families like ours who cannot be boxed into one or the other. We feel the threat of the virus is real, but also believe in the quality and importance of in-person education. We would like our kids to return to school with the assurance that safety precautions will be respected and enforced by all who will be involved in physically returning to school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have Rachel. Go ahead, Rachel.
Rachel, are you there?
Rachel? She unmuted for a second.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, now we hear you.
You can hear me? Can you nod if you can hear me?
Yes. I can hear you.
You can. Okay. All right. Hi, my name is Rachel. I have two children, one starting kindergarten, the second starting second grade at Torrance Elementary. And I had three questions. One, whether or not you were considering using face shields instead of masks, which I've heard a lot of talk about recently. And I don't know the science really in terms of how well they protect, but in terms of being able to see each other's faces, it seemed like an interesting idea to me. Second question is whether or not any outdoor instruction is in the works. And third question is what kind of education might go out to families who do decide to go for the blended learning model, because it seems to me that if we do that, we will be entering into a kind of social bubble with the other families, staff members, and teachers who are in that particular cohort. I want to say thank you so much for your presentation this afternoon. I learned a lot and I appreciate everyone's hard work. Thank you again. I'm finished.
Thank you, Rachel.
Next, we have Jason Zarb-Cousin.
Hi, yeah, this is actually Melissa Zarb, and we have a daughter that will be going into first grade. My question is really just about the teachers and sort of what that footprint looks like, because I understand you're talking about having children in cohorts, which is good, but will those teachers sort of be cross-pollinating across all of the cohorts, or will there be higher staffing levels that allow for those teachers to be in the cohort as well, so that if there is a positive case in any classroom, that the whole cohort, including the teacher, is easily removed? Or if the teachers are crossing across all of them, does that mean every class that that teacher taught then has the impact of being quarantined? So that's my biggest question. And then I just want to echo, I know you're not answering any of this today, but I want to echo that I do think it's important that there is some sort of communication about the enforcement of masks and what will happen there. I know that it has become a contentious issue, that some people are willing to wear them and some people are really not. And so for those of us that are willing to have our children wear them, I think we need to understand what happens for those that don't. Because the kids will sort of see some maybe wearing it and some not, and then that is a mixed message for them. So I want to make sure that there's a communication about what that enforcement does look like.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I have Lauren Coleman.
Like totally split. There's like so many parents that are just like angry with the schools are not listening.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I just have one quick question, and I know you might not be able to answer this, but I have a middle schooler and an elementary school student. Will the board be possibly voting on two different platforms, one for middle school and high school and one for elementary, because the teachers seem to be divided on what's best for the students, or will it be one platform across the district? That's my question, and thank you so much. I really appreciate all the hard work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Denise.
Stay tuned for the discussion. I think we will address that.
Okay. Denise Miller.
He's on the board.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I am not in a position of being a parent of a student. I'm a grandparent of a student and a teacher in Torrance. So I had some issues that I wanted to just raise for your consideration. One is, I know you've got a lot that you're planning for, but what happens in the event of emergencies? For example, fire alarms and those sorts of things that we normally have to deal with as teachers. Have you thought about how those would occur in a safe fashion, because all the kids go out on the field, or there's certain kids who go to, triage or whatever those things may be. So I'm just throwing that out for you to consider. The second thing that I'm concerned about as a former attorney is liability issues. Okay, liability for the district, of course, because if we can't prove that we make a safe environment and people get sick, there are going to be issues, but also liabilities for teachers. Are we going to become mini nurses and take temperatures? Are we responsible for noting if a child has a cough, or believing him if he or she says it's an allergy? And how do we know that and still protect their HIPAA rights? So I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned because having taught, 6 years in the district, I think most teachers want to be with their kids. But I think that people who say that there isn't really an issue and kids don't get sick haven't looked at all the information. There have been 11 cases in the state of California of very serious COVID-related things for young kids. But my concern is a little specific, and maybe I'm not understanding, but if a teacher is a distance teacher, he or she is to teach 4 days a week and then have some kind of extra curriculum that's provided for the elementary school, but somehow we're supposed to also provide for Fridays. I know, Katie, you're probably the one to consider this. And I would suggest this. We had a lot of learning to go on to learn distance teaching. I would challenge, I don't know what happened in the elementary school. I hear some dissatisfaction, but I would challenge most people to say that our kids didn't get a pretty doggone good distance education if they attended. But I want to know, because teachers are humans and we can only do so much. And it has nothing to do with unions. It has to do with humanity. And so if we're supposed to, I don't know if we're dividing it Monday, Wednesday, as we did before, and then Tuesday, Thursday, we have a different cohort of students. And I am concerned because when you do online lessons, distance learning, it takes about 2 to 3 times the time it takes to create an in-class lesson. And I wanted to know too, if you'll be providing distance learning teachers with things like scanners and other materials, or a certain fund that they could access for purchasing lessons that they think are good that they didn't create themselves. And I don't mean sending everybody to con. I didn't do any asynchronous teaching during my time. And I think I have one more. Okay, yes, this was, here's my question. What proof do we have the kids in Torrance lost learning? We're all saying, oh no, they lost learning. My concern initially is their social.
Is that time?
Okay.
Oh, your time's up. Sorry.
Okay. Story of my life.
Thanks. Last thing, lost learning. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Got a couple more. Jean Wilson.
Hi, Jean.
Hello. I first would like to thank the board and the employees of Torrance Unified for doing this. I know this has been taxing on all of you. This has been a hard situation to go through. I am an employee of this district. My youngest son just graduated from high school. We went through all that. But I just want you to know, you've heard all this negative stuff, but I think what you guys are doing are great. You are taking everything into consideration. You are trying to do the best for our kids and for the employees. And I just want to thank you for that. I just want you guys to know that you are doing the best you can with the situation that's going on. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. All right, last person, Lauren.
Hello, hi. I just wanted to share a couple of things, I guess, based on what I heard earlier. I want to echo the sentiment of some of the speakers and a couple of letters that you read about not having that third option to return back to school full time. As a parent with children in elementary school, I wish that was an option. And like the speaker said earlier, we have to understand that going forward, there's risks that we're going to have to take with ourselves and our children, but it's important for them to get back to school and learn full time. And with a previous speaker also saying, what proof do we have that they lost learning? With my 2 children here in the spring, I did see it personally. I had spent a lot of time on campus with them in their classrooms, volunteering earlier on in the school year, and I saw how well my kids were doing. And I was very involved with them here at home, but they still, my son who was in TK kind of fell off with his letters and numbers. My daughter who was in 3rd grade with her writing and math. So I'm concerned about them falling behind going forward and what that will mean in the future. And then also something to consider, I think somebody else did speak about it too, is the masks being worn for the kids at school and what kind of, I don't know, how that will be enforced. And if my child doesn't wear a mask, will they get in trouble? Is that something we're gonna have to deal with? You know, my son was in TK, so now he'll be going into kindergarten, and by volunteering in the classroom and seeing these young kids especially, I know that they have a hard time complying with some of those things. Some of them have a hard time keeping their shoes on, or, you know, keeping their backpacks on the hook or whatever. So I don't know how we're gonna keep the little one keeping the mask on. My son in particular is pretty claustrophobic. He doesn't like to wear the mask. He feels like he can't breathe. And I would hate to send, especially the younger ones, to school feeling like they have to be, you know, just so controlled and perfect and getting in trouble.
We don't want to die either.
I think that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, I do have a couple more. Sabrina?
Hi, thank you so much. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I appreciate it. I just wanted to say thanks again for all your guys' help in hosting. This is awesome. My child was in TK and now is going to be going to kindergarten. And I did see a little bit of loss in recognition of, you know, just the foundation that he had learned. He is or was in preschool, so he had a pretty good foundation going into TK. He is now back at that preschool, and he's doing well. And if we do these A/B chords and on days, off days kind of deal, he will be going to those preschool on the off days. My question is, will you guys be letting other parents that are concerned about quarantining and not being, you know, interacting with other students, will you let them know that we're going to daycare on the off days and not off days? I imagine that might be too, but just a thought there. Second, if high school and middle school don't completely go back, or there's classrooms that are open, is there an option for maybe elementary teachers and students to take over those classrooms? Because elementary needs a little bit more, I think, on the education and the foundation for future and now learning than maybe high school and middle school. They can do a little more online. They can focus a little more online. I don't know if that's a possibility or even an option. I know there might be some issues with that, but it might be a good idea to open that up. And my last thing is with the mask. My son has learned how to use a mask. I don't think that will be too big of a deal for a lot of kids. But will there be an issue with type of mask? He only prefers to wear a mask with a valve versus one without. I don't know if there's going to be standards on that, but I know that he's learned how to use it in the past 2 months with the valve. So just a thought there, but I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Mrs. Riggins, there are 3 more hands raised. It seems like
30 minutes, yeah.
every time we get a couple more, so I'm not sure if you want to just continue these 3 and then, well, now it's down to 2. Take those 2 and then that's it, or how you want to handle that.
Have we reached 30 minutes?
We have.
Okay.
But we can extend it.
I think we're over 40.
We're over 40. Well, how about if we take a break from comments from the public and have a discussion amongst board members at this point. And then if there are still folks that want to speak after we have our discussion, we can go back to them.
What I'll do is I'll lower everyone's hands, and then after your discussion, if anyone wants to speak again, I'll have them raise their hand.
Okay. So where do we want to begin our discussion? We need to decide about our instructional model that we are going to try to look at and go forward with. What additional information do we need? What kind of determination can we come to as a board?
Well, Carrie, as you know, I always have a list of questions of my own.
So would you like to start, Mr. Gerson?
There are some questions that I would like to ask the cabinet. And I think Mr. Hahn also indicated he
Dr. Gerson, excuse me, sorry.
I went first the last 2 times. Do you want to go first, Mr. Hahn, or should I go? Do I keep going?
You're so good that by the time you're done, I might have no questions at all.
May I begin, Mrs. Reagan?
Sure, please do.
Mr. Mara, I wanted to ask one question about operations. So I love that we're using the workforce that we have to keep down cost. And there was a lot of talk about plexiglass, but could you talk a little bit more about the usage? I know we've Classified has gotten the benefit of some of this. It's already, it was early on installed in human resources. I know you discussed school secretaries a couple of board meetings ago in school offices, but, and I think there was a mention about like a plexiglass setup. I saw a picture with you indicating where a teacher might be working one-on-one with a student, but could you talk a little bit more about what kind of plexiglass plans we might see inside a classroom?
So inside a classroom, if needed, we've noted them in the areas where you've got that one-on-one. So you may have a paraeducator who needs to work with a student that's close up. So in those instances where a student is receiving maybe DIS services, where they're literally having to sit with the student because of maybe behavioral issues or academic support, that they're going to be really close to the student. So the plexiglass would be used in those areas. In the spaces where you have the desks spaced out so that you have 6 feet between the students and the teacher, it's not necessary to have it there. Now I know Mr. Hahn wanted to ask me this question, so I'll even go ahead and talk, since we're talking about plexiglass. We had seen, and a speaker had asked about, had we seen other products? There's been no shortage of sales pitches of products in my email. Every day I've seen $20,000 biometric thermal scanners. I've seen it all. I've seen the plexiglass barriers that are put around the desks that they're using in South Korea, right, Mr. Han, where they're able to bring in all the schools, all the students into class. But what they did was they form-fitted these barriers around each student's desk, right? Now, in talking with facilities, and we kind of talked about this, we saw the product, we looked at it, it's like, all right, this is interesting. You think anyone would go for this? And the concern was the cleaning and maintenance of then now plexiglass, right? Imagine miles and miles of plexiglass on our campuses, and then that having to be cleaned, sanitized, and then in between students, when you're going from period 1 to period 2, now you've got this shield that should be cleaned off because you can't disinfect right away because there's a process for disinfecting. Because the disinfectant is a biocide. It's a lot different than just taking Windex and wiping it down. So that's a consideration, and the product is there. If we went that route, then we're really looking at funding, and that really changes things quite a bit. So Dr. Gerson, yeah, the plexiglass that you've seen is primarily for our office spaces where they're going to be interacting with the public, or even between our employees where they sit within 6 feet of each other. Even when they're sitting within 6 feet of each other, the recommendation is you're still wearing a mask, right? Even here in my office space where I have my technicians, they're 6 feet apart, but they still need to wear a mask. Even if we get plexiglass in there, the recommendation is you still want to have a mask on. So yeah, there's been discussions about plexiglass. We are expecting another delivery I don't know what the quantity looks like of plexiglass coming in the next couple of weeks. I think I mentioned that in last week's board presentation, so that we have 800 of them now made, and we think we can make a couple hundred to 300 more pieces of those sheets for protection. Then, Mr. Hahn, maybe that answers your question about if we can get plexiglass on all of the desks.
No, so if I don't mind, if I can jump in here for a second, Jeremy. So I want to make it clear. So when I was talking to Terry, I think we have to understand the spirit of the guideline. The spirit of the guideline is we have to social distance. Don't get me wrong here. I understand. That's why we cannot go 5 days a week. The spirit of the law is saying, but there are exceptions where we just can't fit. So on the call that we had yesterday, for example, the teacher from Fern said, my classroom is only 800 square feet. And my TV is located in a situation where not every kid will be able to see that TV. So that's why I thought about when I saw that article today where it says that there are places where if you can't social distance, then you could use barriers. And that's what I was just suggesting is what does that look like? For example, that classroom was what came up to my mind where you have to angle a certain way for that teacher so that the kids in that classroom can see, because we're going to have situation like that at our school. Because on that call yesterday, it seemed like there were a few teachers who mentioned that their classroom is too small.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, exactly. So in those places, like you said, 6 feet is optimal, and there are going to be times, even the guidelines say the best you can, 6 feet, absolutely. I mean, 5 feet, 11 inches, okay, it's not the 6, but it's the best we can in the space we're given within the constraints. And like I said, especially the workspaces, and I've got a situation here in my own office where I've got 2 folks that are within 6 feet. We turn the desk, doesn't quite work. So I have an order into M&O, and I'm ordering a plexiglass shield, and I've got a work order into our own folks like, hey, you guys, I need something here between Ed and Kate because they're within 6 feet of each other. So Dr. Gerson
Yes,
actually got your answer.
Yes, I was wondering what we were using.
Okay.
Things we had, which you covered. Dr. Liberati, your group was second, so human resources, health and safety. I had a couple of questions. On one of the slides, there was something about a contingency planning subcommittee, but I'm not familiar with what they do. Could you describe what they're working on?
Sure, be my pleasure. Some of the things they're looking at, for example, and I mentioned briefly, is the contact tracing. So contingency planning. Should someone on the campus, a student, an employee, test positive, what do we do now? What are the next steps? Obviously, we're going to contact the health department, follow the orders, but much of that is also going to be ensuring that that one individual isolates as soon as possible, and then start the contact tracing, which includes contacting folks that may have been in contact with that individual and placing them in self-quarantine, and then if they test positive, starting the contact tracing again. So it's contingency planning. Part of what the contingency planning subcommittee is also looking at is what happens if we have to close an office? What happens if we have to close a building? What happens if we're directed by the health department to close the school? What happens if the contact tracing goes into, if it's a high school student or a high school teacher, contact tracing to the middle school? What do we do next? So they're looking at various protocols should something come up, trying to anticipate as much as possible, knowing we're going to probably deal with things that we don't know about yet, but trying to do as much as we possibly can to respond to things as they come up, such as positive testing and contact tracing that would have to follow that.
That's great. When do you think we might be able to see notes from that? Because very interesting and something I think we'd all like to know on board.
I hope soon. So I gave an example based on orders or guidelines we've already received from the different entities that Dr. Stowe talked about, the CDC, the LA County Health Department, LACO, through conversations we've had with them at 7:30 on Wednesday morning. But the orders we receive hopefully by the end of this week, I hope, maybe early next week.
Yeah, they keep telling us that and keep moving it back.
I know, but that's what I'm gonna take back to the committee, the HR Health and Safety Committee, and then we'll dig into those orders, synthesize, summarize, and make sure that we have an accurate rendition of the orders to be able to communicate out and be able to train effectively.
And
so
then,
soon, I hope soon. Is the answer.
In your answer, you will also begin to touch on my second question. So, someone comes in contact, someone's potential. We've heard even if you're showing symptoms but you test negative or different scenarios, and County Public Health says you should still have 14 days quarantine. That's 10 school days and 2 weekends. That would completely wipe out a certificated employee's sick leave in just one incident. How do we deal with that? How do teachers deal with that?
Well, initially, we would ask them to complete the application for the Families First Coronavirus Act, which gives them 10 days on top of what they have. So if they've got 20 days in the sick bank here, HR 6201 gives an employee an additional 10 days, classified or certificated, that does not pull from their accrued sick leave. If there are additional issues after that, having to do with childcare, then it's up to an additional 10 weeks of family leave at 2/3 pay or a maximum of $211. So it's a little bit different than the current family leave that we have, because family leave currently does not pay necessarily. It maintains benefits, but it does not pay. In the 6201, which does expire December 31st of this year, implemented, and we put it out. It was April 1, we put it out on April 8th to every single employee. In that particular act, there's additional pay for the sick time that doesn't pull from their accrued leave, and then for the family leave that continues on with pay, again, doesn't pull from any accrued leave as well.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Dr. Kim, family and community engagement. Well, at this point, I really want to thank the Torrance South Bay YMCA's Executive Director, Mr. McAller, and his staff, because at every communication that I've had with them, they are so willing to try and work within all the constraints that you mentioned to help us out, and really appreciate their willingness to be partners with us. So when I reached out to the City of Torrance on childcare, I did not receive a positive response that they wanted to get involved in helping at all with, especially with, I know the AM/PM, if the board decides to accept that for elementary schools, the kind of hardship that could create with families. Are you hearing something different from the City of Torrance? Are they willing to come to the table and help?
Hi, Dr. Gerson. I've had productive and good conversations with several different people in the City of Torrance. I do believe they do want to help the school district as well as all the families in Torrance. But as I've mentioned, they're under some similar budgetary constraints, such as school districts, municipalities, and other local governments are in due to the poor fiscal times that we're currently in. I do believe they want to help, but they need to see what our concrete plans are, and we need to see what the guidance is, as we mentioned several times, for different agencies and organizations for us to make concrete plans. Once we have that, we can discuss more thoroughly what exactly can be done. There are possibilities. Part of what we're trying to do in our committee is come up with different options for families. So we are hoping the YMCA can help us. We're hoping the City of Torrance can help us. We're hoping that some of our own facilities, employees, and other folks that are already here on our campuses every day can help us. Again, we're looking at a wide variety of options, and our goal is to try to have as many options as possible for Torrance families.
yeah, I'm concerned that on Monday we have to give direction and take a vote, and I don't want to leave families in a lurch. And at the same time, because two of the people who spoke today talked about the teachers union, and at this point I think I should also thank Torrance Teachers Association for being so cooperative and working with each of you, especially with Dr. Crumpy's committee, and being so involved and not trying to disrupt advancing the conversation, but being a part of any solutions that we come up with. So I know CTA, the California Teachers Association, had a huge impact on budget conversations at the state level, but Torrance teachers are super supportive and for our kids and our families. And so I don't want them to get a bad rap. All right, I guess we're on to social and emotional supports, Dr. Egan. I have a couple questions for you. So our students are going to be picking, especially at the secondary level, whether they're going to do blended or distance learning. And Dr. Crumpy has said that there's a possibility that they may or may not have teachers at their own site if they choose distance learning. How does that affect a student's counselor assignment? Will they still be working with the same high school counselor or middle school counselor?
Yes, the plan it would be that anybody who is, for purposes of the academic program, needing to work directly with a teacher who might not have been one at their school site that would have been the intention to do, this still would be assigned to all things associated with their home school. So that attachment would remain intact. A counselor would be the same. Of course, access to all things that may be afforded to other students at the school as far as services, but also included in that would be any extracurricular or fun activities, those kinds of things as well.
There's been I've received a lot of emails talking about mental health of students, and that I guess I don't know, I feel like sometimes I'm in a minority. My children had an excellent at-home experience in the spring and had amazing teachers working with them daily. So I don't quite connect with some of the other experiences that other parents had. But one of my fears is that, we have an aging workforce, and what happens if one of our teachers or staff members does contract it from students? How does that affect the mental health of our students afterward if one of our teachers does go a negative route, have to go into an ICU or whatever? Are we prepared for that contingency?
Well, that's an extremely difficult question. I would be honest and say to you, I don't know how we possibly could be. I think part of what I'm getting from your question is just the general human connection to another person and feeling some sense of responsibility for their ailment or illness or even worse. And I just can't fathom being in the shoes of anyone who, whether it's an adult or a child, who feels that they somehow contributed to somebody else's poor health or poor condition or death. And but certainly, we want to take every precaution we possibly can to create the safest environment as possible. And educate our parents and in forums such as this, and have this open and honest conversation about why it's so important to follow the guidelines that are there to keep us and others safe. And so I certainly respect the question. It's as I said, that's a challenging one. I just don't know that I have an answer for you that says yes with full confidence. Here's exactly how we would handle that. I, as a former school principal, have experienced the loss of and death of teachers during the school year. And I know firsthand the impact that it had on me. I know firsthand that impact that it's had on their peers and colleagues as well as kids. And, you know, it's horrible. And, you know, it's not something that any of us would anticipate or expect. And, you know, we want to do everything we can to avoid that.
I know a lot of people are quoting the AAP, the American Association of Pediatricians, and talking about, you know, pushing kids to go back. And it's a hard thing to balance everyone's health and safety. So yeah, I just wanted to touch upon that. So thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Crumpy. Try not to hate me for some of these questions. In your special populations, I noticed one was missing. What have been the conversations for gifted and talented education, GATE students?
So with the, I mean, within the hybrid model, I mean, the differentiation for those students, I mean, in the blended model, I mean, I think our teachers that have been on the instruction committee and delving in are actually excited that even though they're going to be teaching half the kids at a time and having to do asynchronous lessons, they're going to be teaching half the kids at a time. And so the opportunities for some of the depth of knowledge conversations I don't know that any of them have ever experienced like teaching a classroom with 16 kids in the classroom, and to what level they're able to get into in those conversations for things that they don't always have time for. So they're actually excited and talking about that in the blended learning model. I can speak to the K-5 at this point, virtual model, as that's being designed, the distance learning piece that the resource teachers are designing. And we have our GATE resource teacher that is involved with every lesson plan that they're doing. And so that differentiation aspect for that GATE student is absolutely included. 612, as we, you know, it's like, I'm gonna say next on the list, but the committee has been working so hard. It's like, I feel very guilty with the number of teachers that are working, you know, and asking them to, you know, be on a 3.5 hour instead of the 2.5 hour, you know, call. But it's on the list. They just haven't gotten there yet in the conversation. But I am very confident that that will all be worked out, you know, before school starts.
With the attach on piece to that, with virtual learning, how are AP and elective classes going to work out? Because AP classes, I mean, numbers are a big issue on being able to have them and have enough of them.
Yeah, so this is you are asking tough questions, Dr. Gerson.
Sorry.
No, this is exactly, you know, where we are. So as we work on kind of finalizing the distance learning guidelines and finalizing our AUP, our acceptable use policy, that will protect our teachers from, you know, illegally recording and, you know, things that are against the law, that will help protect our kids and their own privacy, you know, as well. Our high school teachers that are the honors AP, our principals are reaching out to those teachers, and I'm going to call them like those singlet teachers, you know, where there may be only one section at a high school site, and finding out their, you know, whether they're open to live streaming. And so that's one possibility is you know, if there's 3 kids out of the 35 kids that, you know, want to do distance learn, you know, is there a way to put them into one of the cohorts and have them be, you know, be virtual? I think Mr. Mara has spoken about a webcam, a smart cam. I'm not sure what it's called, Mr. Mara, but that actually is smart and will kind of follow the teacher, you know, instructionally. If that's not, you know, if that's not an option, you know, plan B, are there enough across all 4 high schools? So a plan B option is, you know, we really need, this is why this urgency to get the numbers, because once we have the numbers and we know how many kids we're dealing with, they can start to solve these problems. It may be that we have a teacher, you know, between one of the 4 high schools, and there's enough across the high schools for a distance learning class, you know, to occur. So there's a lot of options that we're discussing. In fact, I think a lot of them are being proactive and are trying to get a pulse on both the teacher willingness, but also student preferences. You know, that of some of those singlet classes and what those numbers would like. I think they're asking some questions ahead of the actual ask to kind of know what they're dealing with some of these special situation classes. We don't want kids to have to select a different schedule than they wanted to as great of an extent possible if they're choosing distance learning.
Okay. Can we talk about the schedules in a little bit deeper? So I've seen with the AB model, for example, you've had the Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday example.
Mm-hmm.
Have you delved into others like Monday, Tuesday, the Wednesday break for deep cleaning and the Thursday, Friday? Or have you dug into what if like periods 1 through 5 were Q1 and periods 2, 4, 6 were Q2 as a means of, I know that instructionally I understand these, but safety-wise, the others seem like less cross-contamination, like we heard from speakers today. Have others, other scenarios and models like that been discussed and taken out of the rotation for specific reasons?
Yes, and if you, for your reading pleasure, I think you've been given like some of the 80 pages of notes from some of them, but actually we started out with, I think one of the first models they talked about in an alternate day model was an AA break BB, if you will, meaning one cohort would go on Monday and Tuesday, and they would see their teachers on Monday and Tuesday, 6 periods a day, and then have Wednesday as that deep cleaning you know, day that was asynchronous. I think this was an initial model when the state the State Department of Public Health and then the California Department of Education gave us initial guidelines. Seems like it was a long time ago now. When we started, and that was one of their sample models. In talking between the groups, that is, I think we could admit, probably the safest in trying to cohort, you know, kids. But you still have 6 periods of kids. So you still have 6 periods of kids going in and out. It just separates the Monday, Tuesday, not showing up till Thursday. And they weighed they opted to not have that be their ultimate recommendation because they thought 5 days without seeing a teacher is too long. And so in both of those models, you go Monday, Tuesday, and then you're not seeing a teacher Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And they really thought, you know, long and hard, especially when we're mitigating the cons, you know, not knowing where the board is going to be on the recommendation that there's 2 schedules. Then the elementary weighed in, and then they're like, you know, goodness sakes, no, because for a kindergartner, and I think, and it's not as academic of an example, but one of our leadership team members talked about just trying to get them to learn how to hold the scissors and cut. And every day and then they go to a center and then they learn. And if you do that on Monday and Tuesday and the next 5 days are off, especially in the fall, not happening. Like you're reteaching them how to hold the scissors again. So that was absolutely considered.
Well, I want to stop you there while you're talking about that, because that brings up my question about, can there be 3 options or why not? AB secondary based on day, AM, PM, 3rd through 5th, but K2, can K to 2 come back at least 4 days a week? because I did hear, it was the only time that Dr. Ferrer softened on her instructions was when she started talking about kinders and such. And the needs of K2 students are vastly different. Can we have 3 different options based on those 3 grade groupings?
Well, so not being the fiscal person in the room, when I'd actually asked Judy Chai to come up with some numbers of things. Yeah, it costs a whole lot of money, but we also have had a lot of discussion so know that we have a full day kindergarten, which really isn't full day, but it's close. It's an hour short of a full day. But many surrounding districts still offer an AM PM, kindergarten model. The 2.5 hours proposed, with only 14 or 13 kids in it, they are presuming that they're going to get a lot done. Knowing they can't put kids in guided reading groups and have kids, be at the rug and those kinds of things aside. And they've just begun touching on the conversation of what they're actually going to be able to accomplish with 13, 14, kids in a room, that we actually could get more done in that time than we do when you consider recess and lunch and lining up and then going back and all of that back and forth things that take so much time in managing kids. We actually think that our kinders in an AM PM model will be well taken care of.
Thank you. I'm only going to ask you one more question because
you asked about the doing a few classes at a time.
Yeah, the quarter rotation.
And it's really, and when I talked about the being able, so sure, there's lots of very creative things that they could come into place. Math teachers, world language teachers, not real hot on that, because for classes that grow upon each other, and now I'm going to get emails, but where and okay, I'll pick on myself as a biology physics teacher. I could do biology in a short amount of time. I used to teach it in summer school and have the kids have the whole class. And then they went on into their chemistry, chemistry class. So doing it in a small chunk and having kids then not have it for a while, I think would be okay. But offering Spanish 1 and then them not getting Spanish 2, for a long, long time, it's kind of like the kindergarten thing with the cutting. How much reteaching are you doing because they've had no Spanish for that period of time? So those conversations happened, and for lots of reasons about conference periods and when do they and how kids go in and out, and how do you do that if your period 6 is student council? Do you only get student council for part of the year? There's so many different things that they dropped it.
Okay, I'm only gonna ask one more question because I see I'm putting my fellow board members to sleep. So you said that July 20th is when you expect the deadline for parents to choose if they want to opt into distance learning.
That's a recommendation, yes.
How, and I'm just going to call it buyer's remorse, either side, how will changing minds work in your mind?
So buyers are, I like that. I might steal that. If for every family that wants to trade and there's a family that wants to trade, like like for like that actually works. So we do have surrounding districts that are like sign on the dotted line, but we would like to try to be more flexible than that. What we know we can't do financially and logistically is have more than 16 kids in a classroom at a time. And that's in the typical classroom. We need to maintain that social distancing. And so it really depends on the numbers. If there's buyer's remorse, we are anticipating some of that. We will do everything we can to try to have that happen. We just don't know. I mean, it depends to what extent. If it's a small amount, I bet we're going to be okay and we're going to be able to handle that. If it's a large amount, we might struggle a bit. So we're waiting lists. I know I was when I was a school principal, my school closed sometimes even before the first day of school. We had to send all the excess kids away, but I kept a list. And as soon as I had room, I could get them in, you know, and we keep those kinds of lists. So that's how we anticipate that working.
Thank you. I know you're not on the committee, but Ms. Khan, I don't know if it's possible, but the link that you put in the chat that Dr. Stowe sent out, a lot of people access information via their phone. I don't know if you could consider texting the link to parents so that they have it on their phone readily accessible for Thursday's meeting. Just a thought. Thank you.
Do that.
I'll be quiet now for a while.
Okay. Let's see. Who else would like to speak up here?
I'll speak up.
Okay. Mrs.
Yeah,
Liu?
Dr. Gerson did take away quite a few of my questions, but that's all good. I'm glad he asked those good questions. I want to start off with saying how wonderful the cabinet has been. All you administrators, you have spent, I mean, I personally know that you guys have spent so many hours every day and night working on opening or reopening for school this August. And along with the principals and teachers of every school, I know we're all working all together. And I really have to commend you, our interim superintendent, Dr. Stowe, for really trying to the extent possible, reasonably possible, to include everybody in planning this reopening up. You involve parents as much as possible. You surveyed them, employees, teachers, custodians, classifieds, everybody involved, and even some to kids. So thank you so much for what you've been doing. And work's not done yet. There's still quite a bit more to go, and we all know that. But I just want to give you a midpoint kind of encouragement here that we all notice it, and I'm sure a lot of parents understand it, as said during orals a little while ago. So a few questions I have. One is probably Dr. Crumpy again, but it's about instruction. I want you to clarify a little bit on the distance learning model and the blended / hybrid learning model. For the distance learning, meaning the students will be doing it online at their home the whole time. You mentioned earlier that it will be 4 days a week. Does that mean that they're not doing something on the 5th day, or they're working out of the house on the 5th
No,
day?
let me clarify. So they will be learning 5 days a week, but there's that 5th day, as I'm calling the recommended 5th day, is so our teachers who may be distance learning and blended learning can have a PLC, professional learning community, can have collaboration time. I think it's very important that we work on the consistency. I'm reading through the parent questions for tomorrow. And I think there's a need for how are we going to ensure, in fact, when maybe Terry even read something about ensuring that we're preparing kids regardless of what platform they choose. And so I think that having that time is really important. So if they're distance learning, they're going to be that daily online instruction with the teacher will be 4 days a week. And every student in the district will be doing that 4 hours, a little less for the little kids, but that 4 hours of asynchronous time will be universal regardless of the model, so that we can have that cross collaboration and professional development time.
So 4 hours of asynchronous, meaning not live with the teacher.
Correct.
Time on that 5th day?
Correct.
How many hours per day will they get the live asynchronous teaching for distance learning?
So if they're a middle school or high school teacher, they're going to have 6 classes, and so they will, depending on what's happening in the structure of the kiddo. A middle schooler that might be in 6th grade, will have 6 teachers, and so if it's a teacher that is teaching an entire 6th grade English distance learning section, that teacher, we'll decide. Our guidelines are kind of being finalized, but it says, it says daily. It doesn't say it has to be for 3 hours a day. So I think it really just depends on what they're doing that day, that week, part of the lesson. If, making this up, but if they're writing an essay in class, you don't necessarily have to keep them in a Zoom meeting. And so that could be something that the teacher is instructing on, available, for questions, but kids can log out and actually, do the work. For the distance learning, they are asking us to quantify the instruction that the kids are doing, the assignments that they're doing with a time component. So making this up, one of my English major college kids said it took him about an hour a page. So if he had to write a 10-page paper for class, it took about 10 hours. So that would be one example of, not that we're going to have kids write a 10-page paper, but they would quantify, those assignments for time, to kind of, for audit purposes especially, but also consistency for how many minutes they think things will take, take asynchronously, for students.
So basically it's up to the subject, up to the teacher as to how many hours where she'll be there on screen holding his or her hand, kind of thing.
Yes, and because as I mentioned, I don't know to what extent, but the more specialized their class, it could be possible that they're just at home, but they're in the live class. It is possible that we have teachers that are going to live stream the class, and so the child would be home, but if that was second period, they're going to be in the class just like they were sitting in a classroom.
I see.
I don't know to what extent, it'll be different for every student, depending on their specialized classes that they want. We're trying hard to meet the needs of the student and not design a schedule and then hope the kids fit into our schedule. So I know it seems less organized, but we're doing that on purpose so that we don't have to tell kids no. We do know, distance learning wise, there are going to be classes that aren't going to be, I don't think you can take foods from afar. And so, so there may be a couple in some of the, some of the career tech ed electives, just like the colleges and universities, we're not able to put every class online. We may not be able to put every class online.
I see. Yeah. And in regards to, thank you very much for that. In regards to the blended learning, again, it's, there's the AM/PM model or the alternate day AB model. For secondary school students, if it's an AM/PM model, which I understand is better for elementary school than secondary school, but just say in this hypothetical, if it is AM/PM for secondary school, will they be doing block schedules also, meaning like first and third day will be just 3 classes within those 3 hours or so, and then, or will it be like would it be 6 classes every day in the morning, or would it be 3?
Right. No, what their recommendation, they 6 classes in a morning with like 20, no. So, but they also, when they do a block schedule, then they would see kids once a week. So their recommendation, if they were to have to go AM/PM, would be on a Monday, you would go to your first 3 classes. You do period 1, 2, 3 if you were in the morning block. Then you would do period 1, 2, 3 if you were in the afternoon block. And then on Tuesday, you would go to periods 4, 5, and 6. And then in the afternoon, 4, 5, and 6.
And then if it is the AB model, meaning alternate days, that's also block scheduling, right? Or would it be?
No, they want it to be as regular of a school day as possible. They want 6 periods. Their recommendation is that, and again, it's to get as much face time as possible with the kids. So they want 6 periods a day so they can see kids in total twice a week.
I see. Yeah, I think that sounds good. In high schools, I see, or even middle schools, in between periods, it's usually a swarm of kids, being in close contact and walking around. I understand there'll be signs. Are we talking about signs and paths, like kind of one-way directions on the streets? I mean, not streets, on the hallways, and hopefully that they will stay 6 feet apart, because that's a lot of moving around. If we have 6 periods in one day, it's good that the teachers can see them twice a day, but that does increase the amount of possible contact.
It does. And this, one of the things ahead of the orders coming out and Monday's board potential approval is that they can start working on some of those things ahead of time, because we know those are inevitable. And so they've been tasked by Dr. Kim and Dr. Egan already to start looking at both ingress and egress, you know, what gates need to be opened so that we don't have large numbers of kids all coming in a gate, you know, entering and exiting, but also in between classes, you know, looking at staircases. You know, there's an up staircase and a down staircase, and how will kids go in that one way, you know, kind of fashion. And then Gil, this is impossible, but you know, an algorithm as they in their master schedule that would make them move in a sequential order. Gil, can you come up with that? Well, I mean, you know, I know that that's, you know, that's difficult. And then things that we will recommend, but to what extent they can do this in such a quick time turnaround, I'm doubtful. But you know, are there kids that are in 9th grade English and in 9th grade, you know, biology, or maybe science is a bad example, 10th grade English and 10th grade world history, and the teacher can actually swap and the kids can be there and they can be there first and second period, you know, kinds of things. Whether or not we've been talking a lot about the special singlet, we call them, you know, type AP honors classes, but for a lot of our classes where we've got, you know, 15 sections of biology and that kind of thing, you know, can they put kids together so they can have teachers flip back and forth instead of the kids moving? I don't know in 2.5 weeks whether they can create a master schedule and make that work though.
Yeah.
They will try.
It's quite difficult. And even with Gil's abilities and figuring all these algorithms and everything else. So going with the AB schedule, 6 classes in a day, that goes from 8 to 3 like before.
Yes.
Not the 9 o'clock starting, but the 8 o'clock starting.
Well,
fine.
Okay, in our 8 o'clock start is middle and high school.
Okay.
You know, the hours wise, you know, elementary school is different. It's 9 to 3 for an AB schedule.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure the secondary students have enough hours, just like the regular normal school days. And not like last quarter, during the spring quarter.
No,
when
it would be a full, we want to maximize that face-to-face time as much as possible. And then use the flexibility in minutes for the asynchronous time. So, and then that could minimize on those asynchronous days, you know, the amount of time they're sitting in front of a computer. So, you know, the student choosing the blended learning model will have a lot less screen time than the child choosing distance learning. I mean,
exactly half, which is good, as compared to distance learning. 100% of the time would be.
Well, it even could be less than half, because on an asynchronous day, if you go to the minimum 240 instructional minutes and you divide by 6, that's 40 minutes of instruction that an individual teacher has to provide to a kid asynchronously instead of 55 minutes. So, you know, it takes a little bit of time off, you know, of that instruction.
Good. That actually leads me to the next question, is if there is any consideration of maybe giving the kids a little more time to go in between classes on the AB schedule. Because as I was saying earlier, it's a swarm, and even with pathways and all that, it's going to take them longer if they're really going to try to distance themselves.
So it's so interesting you brought that up. There was a counter to that I hadn't thought of, and they said the longer you let kids walk in between classes, the more opportunity they're not going to follow the rules. They actually wondered if they could shorten that amount of time, and so but because Betty, that is what you just said is exactly where I think administratively we were thinking, and the teachers went, yeah, not their recommendation, but I think that's something they've got to talk about. You know, if I'm going to go up the upstairs and down the downstairs, and you know, we don't want kids, you know, tardy if they can't make it with the new pathway. But they were not in favor of lengthening the intermingling time between classes.
That's very interesting. Okay, if the teacher said so, I do believe that's true. That gives them more time to socialize and. Well, anyway, we all know. Just a couple more things. So just logistically, when we have the AB schedule, 6 classes in a day, is there any cleaning between class period 1 and period 2, and in between each period, when it's going to be a different student that comes and sit on that desk?
So, Mr. Mara or
Yeah.
Dr. Liberati, if you want to pop in. I mean, we know that in between first and second period, they're going to be sitting in opposite seats. So, right, because it's half the number of kids. So in between first and second, you know, and then it would be between second and third where you would have kids coming back in and sitting in the seats that had been, you know, there'd been an hour of airing out of those kids, but of where they sit. But I don't know if one of you want to tackle the cleaning piece.
Yeah, so the, you know, what they recommend, of course, is to try and clean and sanitize every time there's a change of cohort or a group of kids, right? So that's why we've got the pick list of cleaning supplies that the schools will be able to purchase and then have ready in the classrooms. And then also providing for opportunities to wash hands and then having hand sanitizer in all of the classrooms so that the kids do come in with clean hands also. But yeah, you know, who that falls on, we get this question a lot. You know, when you have limited custodial and you have 80 classrooms like in a high school, to wipe down every desk, it's going to fall on, you know, the folks that are around there. And that will be probably our teachers who will need to try and wipe those spaces down as best as they can. You know, you want to, again, it's funny because I actually talked to someone about extending the amount of time between passing periods to give someone a chance to clean the desks, but of course now they're mingling outside and passing germs. So yeah, there's a couple arguments to that longer passing period. You know, you allow the longer passing period to allow for a little extra cleaning and sanitizing inside the classroom. But then I never heard that argument too about they're just going to wander around, following footsteps all over the place and making a game out of it. But
balance.
Yeah. So there is going to be a balance there. Right?
Yeah, I believe there is a little bit of a recess between period 2 and 3, right? For high school, right?
And then same thing, lunch after 3 and 4. And then the end of the day with cleaning after 5 and 6. And then a typical teacher, you know, teaches 5 of those periods. So, you know, in a 5-period day and has a conference period. So,
yeah. And remember that the disinfecting would likely occur at the end of the day in this model of A and B. So the disinfecting is, you know, a little different from the cleaning and sanitizing because you're using a biocide, germicide to kill. So you really don't want kids around when you're disinfecting, right? So.
Yeah, the much stronger one, perhaps. I mean, we're all in the same boat with the teachers, administrators, students. So maybe possible for the teachers to pass the wet wipe around and for the kids to tell the kids to kind of help clean up a little bit, wipe the tables a little bit, if that's possible, if the teachers want.
With the right cleaners, right? You can't have the kids use any disinfectants, so you can't have them. Now that's against the law. So
yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I was there yesterday and this morning, but yesterday for your 3.5-hour long meeting. Thank you guys so much. The meeting with the certificate employees, that was incredible. It went past my dinner time, but it's all right. They had really great questions, the teachers did, and you guys did a great job in answering all of them. You guys mentioned a little bit about that yesterday, I believe, or this morning. I forget which classified or certificate employee meeting it was, but so kids cannot have disinfectant wipes, those Clorox wipes, they can't?
No, they're pesticides. And as a matter of fact, any of our employees that want to use a Clorox wipe has to get a DPR certificate. So I got mine about 3 weeks ago, so I can proudly use my Clorox wipes here, or legally use my Clorox wipes here. Here in my office, because I went through the training, and it's a 20-minute course, and I had my entire department use it because they're wanting to use Clorox wipes. And again, this is it's got an EPA number on it, so it's regulated. So yeah, that's why the kids aren't allowed to use these or any other disinfectant, right? That's got the regulated by the EPA.
Right. So yeah,
regular cleaners is fine, right?
Regular cleaners, did you say?
Yeah, and we have that in stock in the warehouse. So those that are like 70% alcohol, those kinds of cleaners that aren't regulated, that aren't considered pesticides, those can be used, right? So,
so those that are not doesn't have pesticide in them, like hand sanitizers, kids can bring them to their own to school, correct?
Now we haven't.
We provide, but in case they want to bring that.
We provide, and we haven't discussed. Well, we have discussed it. We're not sure whether or not we're going to allow them to bring their own hand sanitizer.
Okay.
So that'll be part of the guidelines or recommendations that we'll have to come up with.
Okay.
But we definitely have enough. At this point, we have quite a bit of hand sanitizer in stock.
Yeah, thank you. Please bring that back to your committee and you guys discuss and see not just hand sanitizer, but what if the kids want to bring in a wet nap or something to clean their own desk. If things like that, if we're going to allow them to bring not just hand sanitizer, but any other cleaning agents.
Right. I think it'd be best, and I'm just, without taking it back to the committee, best that we stick with standard issue cleaning supplies that we have in stock, because we have a stock number, we know the vendor, it's trusted source and all of that, and then we know it works. So
yeah,
I'd venture that way. It's a little more conservative versus everyone trying to bring, well-meaning, I'm sure, bringing their own supplies to try and clean up.
Okay. Well, once you finalize, let us know, of course. Thank you very much, Ms. Mara. Sure. And last question, Dr. Crumpy.
Yeah.
Is in regards to an AB schedule versus AM/PM. I think this applies more for secondary schools again. Is there an advantage for different levels of students? Like, say the 4.0 or 5.0 nowadays, the 4.9 students, do they work better in a AM/PM model or AB model? Or how about the C students? What's better for the ones who don't achieve as high of a letter grade for one class? Is there any studies out there that talk about that?
Well, not between these two models, because these have never been done before. There is some research out there between picking blended learning or be face-to-face. I'm not even gonna call it blended because there's not a lot of, we're kind of unprecedented here. Yeah. But there is research about the distance learning and how it is not, you have to really be more independent. There's is not as much support when you don't have a teacher sitting in front of you making eye contact and and keeping you engaged, and we saw that we learned a lot March through June, and so I think it's more us really paying attention to the families that choose distance learning when we're nervous about never seeing those kids. And that's why we have a new committee, because we have another committee, but we have another committee starting tomorrow, really trying to tackle some of these kids. Our sites know who these kids are, and as we see how they come in, what are the ways that we might even get them to be there. You know, you saw on the one slide with the sample model that we, you know, is there an option on that 5th day to actually have some kids at school?
Yeah.
You know, and like those kinds of things. So all things that once, I think the committees will feel better once there's a model selected, and then they can kind of say, okay, now start going to work on how we can make this work best, you know, for kids. They feel a little stalled, even though there's still a lot. I mean, there's a lot of work that they can do and they are doing, but they're wanting a decision so that then they can start talking about these things and start making those individual contacts and seeing where those families are to try to guide them in the right direction.
Yes, thank you. I think as part of, because of with the blended learning or distance learning, a side effect that I'm optimistically hoping the kids will learn more is to be more self-disciplined and more independent in their learning, which they will need in college especially.
And it was really interesting because teachers have reported that, you know, kids that were not doing as well in their classroom actually did better at home. I mean, and so, you know, and they were very surprised at like who some of those kids were. There are kids who really enjoyed the lack of stress of what they look like, and you know, just different things at school that they felt a little bit more in control, and vice versa. There were kids that, and I think those are the, you know, in a bell curve, we're talking about the outliers, and there were kids that were definitely doing well. I was in a math PLC at one of our high schools, and they said, oh my gosh, this kid has been an A-. I've had this kid for 2 years. They always are hovering in that B+, A-, and they're getting a D right now. I'm like, and so, you know, I think most kids kind of fall in the middle and are doing well regardless of which model it is. But we definitely had those outliers, and the good news is our teachers learned from that. And I think so did the kids. I think the kids learned, especially the older kids, learned a little bit about their own learning styles as well.
Yeah, great, thank you. It's great answers. That's it, President Reagans.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I wanted to do a follow-up question about the hand sanitizer. I've had similar questions from parents about donating hand sanitizer or soap or whatever to school. And you're saying that's a no-go at this point, Gil?
Well, I think I can chime in. Just, I mean, we would accept donations. We would specify what it is that we would want. You know, the county and all the health agencies recommend 70% alcohol in the product, and just as long as we can assure the safety.
I appreciate to hear from Mr. Lee or Mr. Hahn. Go ahead, Mr. Lee.
I have many buttons to push here, so let's get back. When we talked about all this stuff, we still have some CARES money that's set aside, right, Dr. Stowe?
Yes, we're expected to receive about 1.7 million in CARES funds. We've maybe expended less than 100,000.
So are we going to use that for masks and sanitizers and those kinds of things?
Yes, that's the intent.
Because I remember just spitballing that if every mask cost 20 cents and every kid went through a mask a day as well as employees, that's $1 million worth of masks that we'd go through in the course of a year. I don't know if they cost 20 cents a piece, but I just kind of did the math. But so we're going to provide the masks for everybody. We're going to provide the sanitizers. We're going to control the bubble in effect, correct?
That's our plan, and we also would use some of that funding for additional cleaning that we just can't anticipate at this time.
Okay. On another happy note, we did have some excess bond money now that the programs are coming to an end. Some of this plexiglassing divisions of rooms, those kinds of stuff. Does any of that fall into any of those categories? I mean, classroom renovations were part of the bond programs of work. Can we back into some of that if we need to do it in the future?
I don't believe any of that would qualify. I mean, we're with bond money and the capital improvement money that the reimbursement that we're received from the state. It's all about capital improvements, and plexiglass and some of these temporary solutions would not those are supplies. They're not capital improvements.
I'm trying to be creative.
I understand.
Okay. But certainly it would fall into the CARES money, correct? If we needed to have it fall into the CARES money, the 1.7.
The CARES money, and then, you know, I mean, we'll do it whatever we can based on the needs, and we'll assess whether or not we can afford it out of our you know, supplies or maintenance operation budget, wherever we can kind of make do. We already are looking at some capital projects that we were doing, you know, smaller scale ones out of M&O, and how can we utilize the available bond funds or state reimbursements for that.
Yeah. And then lastly, and I know Dr. Gerson, I get to call you doctor, that's kind of cool. And Mr. Hahn and Mrs. Liu all had some very technical questions, so I'm not really going to get into that. What I am impressed with, as Betty and I think everybody said to this point, is that, you know, the amount of work that from the custodians to the teachers to the managers to the cabinet through everybody else to work through this. And quite honestly, we're going to make a decision next Monday that very well will have to change in 2 weeks again. And so, you know, we're, to use a word they like to use on ESPN, we are efforting to get all this done, but hard to say if this will be the final plan. The other thing is, and I'll say it now, while not ideal, I think it's important for the younger kids to have a routine of going to school every day. I think it's important to me, living with an educator who's certainly told me how important it is for kids between kindergarten and grade 3 to learn how to read so that later they can learn how to learn. I think that's critical. I think that's the critical piece in all of this, is that they have to learn how to read at those younger ages, so we're able to educate them later. And I like the concept of them going to school every day and building that routine. I know it's a nightmare for parents, and especially when you look at middle school on being on a completely different schedule. But quite honestly, I'm not sure how you're going to coordinate any of this anyway. I think sometimes in situations like this, we allow perfect to be the enemy of the good. And so I think we're in a situation where, yeah, we got something that'll work. I think the community as a whole should be rather impressed with how we've handled everything since March 15th, both how the parents have handled it, how the kids have handled it, how the teachers have handled it, how the custodians and the Gill staff and everybody else have done all the things that we've had to do to keep this thing flying, and we really have. So I'll keep my remarks short, and thanks to everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee. And now we're down to Mr. Hahn.
Thank you, President Reagans. Just a couple things. Again, I just want to reiterate what everyone shared here today. With everyone that's been working so hard on making this all happen, all the stakeholders, all the task force committees, subcommittees, cabinet, you name it. Even the teachers yesterday were on a 3.5-hour long session call. Even today, we had a classified today. Everybody's been trying to be informed as much as possible. I want to make sure that's clear. There's been a lot of comments about people saying, who's on these committees, but we believe that is a fair representation. So I'd like to ask Dr. Stowe, how many people are on the committees and subcommittees? Are parents, custodian, mental health people?
I would defer to Dr. Crumpy because I think she has the exact numbers, but we're talking over 200 people.
You muted.
You were breaking up. Was the question how many total people across all the committees?
Yes.
Yeah. It's well over 200. I think it's approaching 300 when you consider the committees and then subcommittees that have broken up, that have union representation on each of the committees, parents on each of the committees, definitely teachers on all the committees, administrators, and then all the specialty positions as appropriate on those appropriate committees.
That were actually on these committees, and so that's been fantastic.
But I'm going to take off my microphone to go this way. So I have a couple of questions here that I want to ask.
First of all,
Dr. Kim,
the question
you said in your presentation regarding resources, it was started being promoted on July 2nd. What happened?
How come he's reverberating?
Terry, can you maybe mute while he's talking? Maybe that'll help.
And, regarding the on your slide, you said something July 2nd that we started providing resources or promoting resources, but I don't know where those were found.
It was sent out in an e-blast by Tammy Kahn. They're also going to be on TUSD.org.
Okay.
And they'll also be highlighted in a live presentation next Wednesday.
Okay. Yeah, because I haven't seen it. That's why I was just kind of curious. I don't know what you were referring to when you said that there was July 2nd. So I just wanted to make sure that people know where to find that resource if it's out there.
Okay, and it is on TUSD.org as well.
Okay. And so for Katie, so a couple questions, or Dr. So first question I have is 80% of our parents said that they want to come back to the schools. What is the capacity of the number of students that we can have in school based upon social distancing? So if 80% of our students came back, can we social distance on campus?
No.
Okay, so if less of that happens, then how are we gonna determine who gets cut and has to go virtual learning?
Oh, I'm sorry. In the model we projected, can 80% of our kids come back? Yes, because that's why we have I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. I thought you meant full-time. In the model that we presented where, then absolutely.
Okay.
Because we have 100% of kids now. So if there's only 80% of kids and then they're coming into a class alternate times, we'll actually have 20% availability of possible space.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
No, I was to say for our special populations and childcare and different things like that.
Okay. And so the other question that I have is, obviously, when we first did the employee survey, there was obviously a lot of teachers wanted to come back. Things may have changed. My question is, what will we do if we have a shortage of teachers? Is that a possibility?
Is that a possibility? I guess it could be a possibility. I don't foresee that from the survey that we did, although we did have a couple teachers yesterday that indicated due to the increase in numbers, they'd like to see another survey because they may change their opinion now. So we would have to have that, I suppose. But we also have quite a few teachers that want to work.
Right. So let's say 50% of, let's say we do that survey again, and 50% of teachers say they don't feel comfortable coming back. Then do we have a contingency plan in place if 50% of our teachers say, I just don't feel comfortable coming back?
We have not talked about that.
Okay. Because I think that could be a very strong plausibility because obviously, because of the news, I'm just wondering, I just want to make sure that we have some kind of plan in place if that is a real realm of possibility. Because again, we don't know how people are feeling. Obviously, the one sentiment I got yesterday from that teachers meeting was they want another employee survey to be done to see what that would look like. I just wanted to make sure that we have contingencies in place just for anything that might be possible regarding that. The other question for Katie is, Dr. Krupke, is the whole distance learning thing. I learned a lot today of the elaboration of this. So a couple of questions. Number one is, just for the people that are out there, is it possible that when you're talking about distance learning, especially in the secondary schools, that you may have kids from different high schools in one class?
We could. That is not, I mean, we're going to try to do it within each high school first, and then we'll have to have conversations when we can't make that work.
Because I'm thinking, based upon Dr. Gerson's comment, the AP classes, like, you know, there could be 3 kids from a high school that says, I want to distance learn to be in the AP class.
Right.
So we're going to provide a teacher for just 3 kids for distance learning. We're probably not, correct?
Right. So that's where we hope, and the principals are reaching out to those teachers of those specialty classes on their, you know, what their comfort level is with different options of learning for kids. And if they just say live stream them in, we're good. I think, you know, do we have a backup in Odyssey where, you know, if we have you know, we have to put somebody on an online platform class, not our preference, but we could if we had to. So they're kind of surveying their teachers right now to see where they all stand, and, you know, with how to instructionally, you know, help those kids that have applied into those classes. And, you know, and I even heard from someone in one of these meetings that, you know, because in typical honors AP classes or summer work that the teachers have assigned, they're communicating with their kids. The kids are emailing, have a question about summer work, you know, and so teachers so choose to, you know, respond to those kids. They're actually already having conversations and making connections with those kids, you know, already. So I think they're already kind of pre-talking about this ahead of the meeting next Monday night.
Okay, so basically that is a possibility though, where we might have to combine classes just because of the fact that we don't have enough kids for that subject, AP English or AP History. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear for the audience so that they understand that that's a possibility.
I think the greater possibility, to make sure everybody understands, because at a high school with 2,000 students and you have a lot of teachers, you've got a lot of flexibility. A teacher who is really good and likes this and says, bring it on, and I want to do this, you know, all day long, you know, kind of a thing. I think with some of the sizes of our elementary schools, that the chance of, you know, of having, you know, our first thought is that we're going to try to do it within the quadrant, you know, and we've got to see the numbers and see the numbers per grade level. But I think there's a greater possibility the younger they are or the younger the level than in the high school. I think there's more of a possibility that elementary kids may not be instructed in distance learning by a teacher at their school. And that's why, and I know Dr. Kim and Dr. Egan, and we're all working very hard to ensure with our principals that there are multiple things in place that keep kids connected to their home school. We're not trying to change their school. I mean, I know I saw a couple of parent, you know, questions about, you know, can they be in the flag salute? And, you know, absolutely. Those are the kinds of things that even being that they did well during, that a lot of our schools did well during these last 3 months on how to connect kids. So they've had a little bit of a trial and error with that. But with the, you know, at the elementary level, they all have an RTI&I, the response to instruction intervention teacher. They all have school counselors, you know, that will be tasked with ensuring that connection of those kids is back at their home school. You know, much easier if I'm a 3rd grade teacher at Edison to connect the kids that are at Edison. But if 3 of my kids are from UConn and 2 of my kids are from Carr, we need to keep those kids connected to Carr and to UConn.
Okay.
And if I may, Mr. Hahn, a number of years ago, when we first began to offer a couple online classes in the district, we had a teacher at North High that taught an English class, an online English class, and there were students from all 4 high schools in that class. And so that's kind of how we got the ball rolling with some of those online courses. And if we think about really maximizing the opportunities for students, that's a good way to look at it, because maybe not every school can offer an AP course in a particular content area because they don't have a teacher that's doing that, or different schools have, as much as we want them to be able to offer the same opportunities, sometimes that's always not the case because of staffing and the student demand at a school isn't there. So you really to maybe take a step back and look more globally at the opportunity for students at our schools to engage with others and expand the opportunities that they're afforded. This is maybe the beginning of something that we look at as a benefit down the road.
But we're not going to look into that now, right? We're not going to offer. Yeah. I was going to say, okay. I want to make sure that's clear, because that would be so confusing at a time like this. So the other question I have, you mentioned that so some teachers they'll be teaching the blended as well as the distance learning.
Well,
you mentioned that, Dr. Crumpy.
I know I'm talking a lot, but I mean, part of me says as a prior high school teacher, my preference would say bring it on. If I'm supposed to have 168 kids throughout my 5 periods, give me the kids. I'll figure out how to best teach them. We heard from I think a 3rd grade teacher from one of our elementary schools that even brought up yesterday, well, if I just live stream them and then if a kid's sick, they can actually still be in my class and not be absent. And I think we've learned a lot through these last few months, that if this just happened and we had to start planning this without the our initial implementation of this, I think they've learned a lot. And I would just say, let me manage my kids and organize them. Now, that being said, not everybody's comfortable with that same thing. And so we're really trying to make sure, I go back to what's best for kids, but doable for teachers. And I think we had another teacher yesterday that was trying to wrap their head around, how would I teach kids what, right? Well, then we're not trying to make people really uncomfortable either. So is that a switch of an assignments? If the only way we can make that happen with those 5 AP, I use as an example because we have 1 section of multivariable calculus in the entire district. And so if there are those 3 kids, what do we do? I mean, I'm just crossing my fingers that teacher is willing, if there's kids that are distance learning in that classroom, that they'll help them out. And so that's what's being worked on, I guess. And let's just throw crazy ideas out, that because I think Terry read one of these letters. Families are making decisions based on what's right for their family. Would they, what if that was 1 period and that they, and what if the only way for them to come? Because I think we heard something, Terry, about what about the science labs? And, so if I wanted to take Mr. Hagan's advanced, engineering project lead the way class that gave me dual enrollment from El Camino, and I don't know, I'm going to start getting crazy emails from people saying, what did you just, open up to? But I mean, but a lot of our teachers are just raring to go and have solutions to things once they kind of know what their schedule might look like. And so I think once we get these models kind of solidified, and then they can go on and then they can start having these problem solved. Maybe a family is really nervous, but if it's just 1 period a day and they're going into a specialized class, they would feel comfortable with that. I don't know if that just is totally out of line and not workable, but I hope you're sharing. Teachers want to see their kids and they want to do whatever's right for their kids, and we're going to try hard until it doesn't work, and then we'll have to come back and share what doesn't work.
My only concern is that for the kids that who are going to be distance learning and they can't make that exception, then what happens? Totally. Yeah.
And I don't want to promise that it's going to be 100%. But I think for those definitely, you know, A through G and college and graduation requirement classes. And, you know, if we have to prioritize and make tough decisions, you know, we'll do that. But we still want to try to do it with the best interest of the kids. I mean, I certainly hope, and I don't want to misspeak, but you know, if you're the student body president, that's going to be a tough thing to do via distance learning. Not that we're going to not let them do that, but you know, we've got lots of kids that do lots of special things in high school. And actually, when you look at the survey results, when I say 80-20, it's actually higher in high school, more, and the older they get, it was almost 90 by junior and senior year, you know, type of a thing. There's a greater extent of high school kids wanting to come back. So we really, you know, the quicker we can get who wants or needs to distance learn, and then start working on that kind of one kid at a time, you know, the better.
Okay. So basically, that's obviously for high school. For elementary, I can't imagine us having teachers do virtual and blended, right?
No.
It's just for the high school, basically, or
Yeah.
middle school. Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure that was. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
We're not now. I mean, we did have a teacher yesterday that said, I can do that for an absent kid, right? I mean, I also don't want to limit people's, you know, possibilities of, you know, I think our district, I've always loved the fact that our district has the art of teaching as paramount. You know, the standards are the what is not negotiable. We know what we have to teach, but the how, I think has served us well, of allowing that independence. Tight loose, you hear me use a lot. You know, what are our tights, and then let them go as well. I don't want to limit, you know, people who've been very imaginative, but I don't foresee a kindergarten class of a teacher trying to keep masks on kids and teach them how to cut and use scissors, and then have kids watching them on a Zoom call. Maybe I'm wrong, and there's somebody out there watching this that says I totally could do that, but I'm not sure how that would work as easily.
Okay. So my other question then also becomes this, regarding the face masks. So my question is, if there is a student in the, let's say, what are we going to do about kids that who want to come with blended learning, but they have underlying breathing issues, like they have underlying health issues, so they're not required to wear a mask. They come into the class. Will we inform the parents of those kids that are in the class that there's going to be one child without a mask on? Because they might be concerned because you're going to have a child with underlying conditions in that classroom. So how are we going to deal with that contingency?
I'll give it a try. There's different ways to kind of resolve that may not require the face mask. Maybe it's a shield with a garment underneath it that tucks into the collar. So we'll do the best we can to support that student. I've also seen face masks that are clear in front, and some of our speech pathologists have asked about that. So we'll certainly do everything we can to assist that student in maintaining as much of the protocols as possible while still adhering to the instructional objectives. But informing other students or parents, I've not seen that in any of the protocols. We'll see what we get at the end of this week as it relates to informing other folks. In the contact tracing, of course, we'll have to inform, but not regarding PPE. But our objective will be to meet the PPE protocols that the order puts out. And as Dr. Ferrer said last week, and she said it in the past, if we go from 6 feet to 5.5 feet, you might have to do that in a room that's 800 square feet versus 960 square feet, but it increases the risk. So anything we do that steps away from the protocols that they're going to put in place for us to follow, and we've asked specifically for orders as well. So it's really, there's no flexibility in my opinion. We'll either increase risk or reduce the risk. And I think the recommendations that have come forward following the protocols that we know about hopefully decrease risk and allow the instructional program to continue.
Thank you. But yeah, I appreciate that, because I could see that happening where people will have underlying conditions, and we're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna manage that in the classroom, so whether it be face shields or whatever it may be. And I think that, but again, I was just wondering how we're gonna inform the parents, or do we have to inform the parents, or what are those guidelines? But I guess we're not really sure yet regarding that as well. And so the other question I have, Dr. Crumpy, is have they decided about grading? You know how we went pass, no pass last year? Or I mean, you can grades, but you can ask for pass, no pass. Do you know anything about that regarding this coming year? Will it be the same model, or will there be a
That's not our
difference?
recommendation. Although we, on the, although not discussed in depth, the general consensus, in fact, it came out in our very first meeting the Friday before Memorial Day, was no, back to standard grading. While they're certainly up for discussion of different things, but we lost a lot of kids because of that. And so they strong, in fact, one of their first things that they wrote down in their first set of notes was kids have to be held accountable for the work that they need to do. And so we're 180 days of school. Yes, we have a different model, but our PLC teams will be discussing what are those key, learning targets and essential standards. So we have that consistency around what we're teaching. And so if we're teaching, if kids have to master what it is we're teaching, then they should be able to be graded on it. And that's their draft recommendation at this time, but I could definitely get in more detail in a few weeks. But those are their initial thoughts.
Do you know any districts that are going to do something different? Are some districts still going to go pass, no pass? Have you heard anything about that? Or
I have not. I have not, and I don't want to misspeak. I'm on a weekly conference call, and I had to get off a little early for this meeting today because it's every Wednesday afternoon. But what I have heard instead was how many of them wish that they had used our model. And I think that the work that I know, I know was predominantly secondary because we do a standard-based elementary, but I know Dr. Egan and the principals worked tirelessly on coming up with that, bringing it back to their leadership teams and their teachers and back and forth in that conversation. And I think it was so valuable that what we came up with, that we are going to see a little bit less lost learning than in some, in some, because our kids knew that they're even though we were holding them harmless and we were focusing on the essential standards, and that was a lot less. They knew that they were being held accountable for the learning. So that's what I've heard from area districts, is that they had wished they had done it more the hold harmless our way. But I don't know that anybody's quite there yet with that specificity.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that was clear so that our parents would understand that, because that's something different that we're going to do this fall that they weren't sure. I want to make sure that there's no pass option this time.
Right. That okay. And I know that the committee also says a little bit different, but and I know I've given it over to Edon and Tammy with the communications committee. Our committee also wants there to be very clear understanding by parents that if the model is approved as recommended with the 1 day of asynchronous, for all of the different things that need to happen, that it is still a 5-day school day, because that is different also from this, we had a 4-day with Fridays off for kids, and that is not, we are in school for 180 days, and they want it to be very clearly and frequently communicated that kids are in school every single day, regardless of their model and that they choose.
Okay. Just 2 more questions. Number 1, earlier when you talked about distance learning, I want to make it very clear that distance learning is for anyone who wants to have distance learning. The way you stated it, it sounded like it was only for those who have issues that they have to distance learn. I want to make sure that's not the case. What was clear is that anybody that wants it can do it.
Yeah, we're going to put that statement in, but what we heard is, that's the trailer bill language in the distance learning, protocol. But when we asked for, opinion on, wait a minute, what does that mean? It's a broad, it's a broad stroke of what health concerns and health reasons mean. And so we'll have a statement that, I think they want to make sure it's not for, we're not designing an alternative school. So the trailer bill language talked about, is what had that specificity, but we are not required to have them turn in doctor's notes when they apply for distance learning.
Okay, so we won't even ask for a reason when they apply for distance learning.
No, we're going to have a statement that's the guideline and go from there.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear, because it just seemed a little unclear when you were stating that position. Last question, just a follow up regarding the issue about face masks again. So you usually in our classrooms, like especially elementary, there are kids that are in the classroom that have special needs, correct?
Yes.
So let's say you have a child in there that just cannot because of special needs. It's just like yesterday was brought up in our teachers meeting. But what are we going to do about kids that have behavioral issues in these classes? How would we be able to mitigate that?
So I think we're going to try our best and do whatever we can to get them used to, so having the parents help us and work with them, ahead of time. We realize that for some of our very severe, students, that is going to be a struggle. We heard on a call today from the nurse that gives us input once a week, that in very rare exceptions can we go to a face covering. So that face, having them have that shield instead of a cloth mask, but it's not. They made it clear today, so we'll see what the guidance says Friday. But that cloth masks for everybody until it doesn't work, or there's a medical reason, and then you need to go to a shield. But it's not optional that people get to choose which one they want. That was at least part of the our Wednesday morning briefing today.
Well, thank you. So I think my biggest issue is special needs. I think that my concern is for them, trying to make sure that we do everything, because to me, they're the most vulnerable and they're going to have the hardest time. I want to make sure that we have enough resources to really provide for their needs.
Well, and I think too, then it's more, and I don't want to speak for Dr. Liberati, but then you're the person working with that student, and that you would be provided additional PPE. So that may be, if that child can't wear that face covering, we also want to protect that employee or those employees that are working with that child. And so that may be giving them both a face covering and a face shield that optimizes or increases the safety for that employee.
But thank you, last but not least, but thank you for that timeline. That was absolutely helpful. And I think it's gonna be very helpful for the parents. That was something that was very needed. Thank you so much for that. I'm done, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hahn. Is my speaker working? Is it working? Okay, because it says it's not again. This happens to me periodically. So I just had a couple of things to say. Can you guys really hear me? Am I breaking up? Yeah, I don't know what to do about that.
We're trying, we'll listen hard.
Okay. I wanted to hear from teachers and from parents to see whether there was a problem with having different schedules at different levels. Only a few people mentioned that. So that sort of quells my concern that would be problematic for families. And I appreciate that input. I do think that looking at our choices and the recommendations that have come forth, that they are similar to those that have been presented in other districts. There are only so many choices, and I hope that we can come to some joint decision here on exactly how we're going to manage that. I did want to mention that I spent a lot of time talking with medical people about the medical issues. And after some of the comments today, I truly don't want to pit parent against parent. But the medical people were very clear that putting kids back in schools is a huge liability. And that's my last question, actually, is about our liability as a school district, because I know that our insurances are limiting their consideration of communicable disease cases. Is that right, Dr. Stowe? So I also know that Representative O'Donnell is going to be putting out some legislation to try to assist us with that, but that weighs very heavily on my mind. And Mr. Lee, I need you to look into that for us as to where we're going with that and how that's going to all pan out for us. But I think that's it. We've been at this long enough. It's time to call it quits this evening. Can I get a motion?
A motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Good. I make a motion to adjourn.
Sure. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to adjourn. Thank you all for your sharing and questions and consideration. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Good night.